Good evening, everyone. Welcome to this evening's Scrutiny Commission meeting. I am the chairman of the Commission. My name is Caroline Culver. Members of the Commission who are present this evening are Councillors Anthony Amatharaj, Dominic Bowick, Paul Dick, Ross McKinnon, Eric Pattenden, Christopher Reid and Martha Vickers. We are also joined this evening by Councillor Ian Cottingham, the Finance Portfolio Holder, and the following officers: Joseph Holmes, Acting Chief Executive; Shannon Coleman-Slaughter, Service Director for Finance, Property and Procurement, and also the Section 151 Officer. Gordon Oliver is Clerk for the meeting, and Vicky Phoenix is the Zoom host. And we also have Sarah Clark with us, and also Dawn from the legal team, and also Paul Coe, Executive Director for Adult Social Care. Tonight's meeting is being live streamed on YouTube, so members of the public are able to view proceedings. If we hear the fire alarm, we must leave the building immediately via the emergency exits. The assembly point is the Dolphin car park. If the lockdown alarm sounds, we will await instructions from officers. We will adjourn the meeting until such time as it is safe to proceed. Finally, I would like to take the opportunity to remind members that we are subject to the Council's Code of Conduct, which requires us to uphold certain standards, including, importantly, respect. We may not always agree with one another, but I would ask that in our disagreements, we are always respectful of one another's views. Do members have any questions? No, thank you very much. Do we have any apologies, please?
Yes, Chairman, we've had apologies from Councillor Jeremy Cotton.
Thank you. So turning to the minutes from the 26th of November, do members have any comments on the minutes, please? I just have one under paragraph 34. It says wet Berkshire Council, which is probably appropriate at the moment with the various flood warnings that we've got. Any other comments? No. Proposer for the minutes, please. Councillor Dick. Seconder, Councillor Reid. All those in favour? That's unanimous. Thank you very much indeed. Moving on to actions from previous meetings. Does anyone have any comments on this? Councillor Vickers.
Just a highlighting, actually, 213, early intervention and family help. It's good to see that we're taking action to take support out to our rural areas, and looking at the details and even looking at some possible transport. So that looks like a really good intervention. But the only thing I would possibly sort of question a little bit is I think I've seen a poster attached to this which shows the timings of some of the early intervention sessions in the libraries, and it only looks as though they have about 20 minutes or something. So it seems a very short time for people to turn up and get a little bit of help. 20 minutes is a very short span, so I don't know whether that could be looked at and expanded just a little bit. But the actual the detail and getting support out to the rural communities is really very promising, and I think it's a great initiative.
Thank you, Councillor Vickers. Perhaps we could minute that, Mr. Oliver, and just ask for a bit more detail about that. I think the library, the pop-up libraries are for about an hour, but it's the family support worker, is it, that's there for less time? Is it? Yeah, but let's ask. Yes. Yeah, so let's ask for clarification about that, and also how people book an appointment, because we wouldn't want people to turn up and find that there's insufficient time for them.
It was called a drop-in.
Yeah.
So the whole point would be you didn't have to have an appointment, you could just turn up.
Okay, let's get a bit more detail about that then. Thank you, Councillor Vickers. It mentions housing in there. I did talk to Councillor Gaines, the portfolio holder, about housing. It is something that's still on our radar. I'm conscious that the Renters Reform Bill paper is going to be going to executive soon. And there's also a housing strategy and empty homes paper, and something about veterans and care leavers and what we're going to do to support them as well. So I'm still waiting for various things to come through the pipeline, but Health Scrutiny Committee and Health and Wellbeing, I believe, are looking at issues around housing as well. So we just need to make sure that we all all work together on that. And concerns were raised previously about Sovereign as well. I did have a meeting with someone from Sovereign because a lot of concerns have been raised about the fact that they are selling off houses and they don't necessarily have to use the proceeds in the same area. And they said they would send me a statement or a Q&A about that to offer some more explanation. So we'll keep housing on our agenda. Yes, Councillor Bowick.
Thank you. This matter has been raised at more than one of my parish councils, and I found it just about impossible to get any kind of sensible response from particularly Sovereign, in spite of two MPs asking for explanations. I think it's a real concern of mine.
Thank you, Councillor Bowick. Councillor Dick.
Thank you, Chairman. Two things. 178, pleased to see that. It's in progress. We're giving a report in March. Will that include that? The budget reminds me, the budget item reminds me of the previous budget where there was an extra officer appointed at a rather large salary to sort out the work that was going on there and improve it. Can we make sure that that report includes some comment about the effectiveness otherwise of that officer? It was for a year, as I recall it. And the other thing is that wherever you see red, you see Thames Water, and that's hugely disappointing. Discuss.
Absolutely. I think Chris 190. Have you heard anything else about that?
Sorry, yeah, my fault. There has been some email interaction between the chair of the that parish council, Councillor Edward Hanrahan, who's also a member of the Pang Valley Flood Forum, and Thames Water. I need to catch up with that to see if that is answering his questions, but I would state from the number of exclamation marks that he put in his reply, I suspect not.
Okay. Right, thank you for that update, Councillor Reid. And Councillor Dick, going back to what you said, I believe there were two senior posts that were created using the funds from Delivering Better Value. And you are correct, they were for a set period of time, but yes, let's ask about that. Thank you. Any other comments on the action log? I don't understand 207. I don't understand why it's taking them so long for Thames Water to get back to us about the simple question of the ownership of Thatcham sewage works. It's beyond me why it's taking them that long to answer. Perhaps offline, Gordon, you could let me know who there you've been trying to get an answer from, and we'll see if we can get that progressed. Councillor Reid.
Just a point on that, that is particularly interesting because of SB 17 in the local plan. There's significant concern being raised by residents. It's running currently at capacity. We're going to have a new town uphill from that to use the same sewage works. We've got a company that's virtually bankrupt, and so who owns it? How it would be, you know, you can't build the houses first. You're going to have to sort out the sewage works, and where on earth are they going to put it is going to be the big question.
Yeah. Okay, we'll chase up about that. Councillor Bowick.
Just help my memory. Why are we bothered about ownership of the sewage works?
It's an excellent question. So it's something that would have arisen at the October special meeting that we had with Thames Water. So I think we need to go back and check the minutes. Yeah, we'll go back and check. Yeah. I know there were quite a lot of actions that arose from that meeting. Okay. Any other questions? No. Okay. So we'll note that then. Thank you very much. Any declarations of interest, members? Oh, okay, great. Any petitions?
No petitions received, Chairman.
Okay. At this point, members, I'd just like to acknowledge the passing of our colleague, Melanie Best, whose funeral it was yesterday. Sorry? Melanie Ellis, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. Yeah, my apologies for that. She would have contributed a great deal to the process of coming up with the finance papers for this meeting this evening. And I know that her colleagues will miss her greatly. So as a sign of respect to her, and I do apologise again for getting her name wrong, I'd just like to note that this evening. before we begin the rest of the agenda. Thank you. Right, now I think we might be slightly reordering this. We have the investment and borrowing strategy first on the agenda, but did you want to do the MTFS first? I'm happy to.
Chair, I'm happy to follow the agenda.
Okay.
I've got my notes in order.
Oh, okay, fair enough. We'll go on to investment and sorry. We'll go on to investment and borrowing strategy then.
Right.
So over to you, Councillor Cottingham. Thank you.
Very much, Chair. So what I'll do is with each individual paper, I'll do a little bit of context and introduction into it. So the first paper on the agenda is the investment and borrowing strategy for financial year 25-26. As we know, the purpose of the paper is really to detail the strategy for our cash flow and working capital. It's really important for us, making sure that we have the appropriate level of borrowings, we comply with the various regulations in place. I think key, as we've talked about this in previous meetings, has been interest rates, which determines our strategy. So we're well aware of the Public Works Loan Board, roughly 5.7%. I know we had an interest rate cut last week. Hopefully that's going in a south way position, getting closer to our long-term weighted average rate of 3.75%, which, as I say, determines the mix which we have between long-term borrowing and short-term borrowing. When interest rates get closer to the 3.75 weighted average, we'll be stepping into the market to have longer-term borrowing. We also have our own sort of internal rules regarding the mix between short-term and long-term, which we monitor. In fact, we had a meeting about 3 or 4 weeks ago. Was it just before Christmas? Just to make sure we weren't breaking our own internal rules with regard to that we didn't have over reliance on short-term borrowing. A subject which we'll be talking about later on today in each individual paper is the EFS, the letter written in January for exceptional financial support, in essence, borrowing from the government. That particular 16 million doesn't breach any of our various rules and compliance. Something which really of note, really, as I say, which to get out there is the DSG high needs block override. So the fact that we're looking to complete the year at £17.5 million of, in essence, which this council's having to fund, and by the end of 25-26, that's going to increase to 30 million. So that is something which we're having to fund from our own capital borrowing, even though there's a bit of an accounting trick that it's seen to be off balance sheet. So in accounting parlance, it's a special purpose vehicle. It's not recognised as a liability, even though the government haven't said whether or not they're going to call it in 2026. They haven't announced anything. I did attend a conference in January, local government conference at Whitehall. That question was directed to the Minister for Housing, Communities and Local Government. He did say that they recognise that this liability is coming very quickly and they will do everything to resolve this with local authorities. I would deem to be there would be a number of local authorities would go bust if this debt was called in for the DSG. There was some quite strong comments coming from accountants in the room, as you can imagine, saying it's just ridiculous. It's not recognised as it's accounted for off balance sheet. So for next year, we're looking to have a capital expenditure programme of 73 million. There is more detail in further papers. We believe the fact that the mixture of internal and external funding, it is affordable within the constraints of the various, as I say, compliance stroke regulations which we have to face regarding our borrowing headroom.
Thank you very much, Councillor Cottingham. Questions, members? Councillor McKinnon.
Thank you, Chairman, and thanks, Councillor Cottingham. Just looking at the investment borrowing strategy, I couldn't really find much reference to the emergency financial support that has been applied for. I know it is mentioned, obviously, in some of the later papers. I've just got some questions about the borrowing cost of that loan. Let's assume that it's granted. But the figures that are quoted in 7.5, 7.6 about capital financing as a proportion of the budget, is that inclusive of any repayments of emergency financial support that may be granted?
Not at present, because we don't know the terms of the loan. So we don't know what the interest rate is going to be, nor the actual length of it. We don't know if it's going to be 5 years, 10 years, but within the letter which we wrote, we said we would use best endeavours to pay it back as quickly as possible through the capital receipts from the sale of the commercial property portfolio. So in essence, we would get a short-term loan from the government and then pay it back as soon as possible with the receipts which we then receive from the commercial property.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you. If I could just have a couple more, thanks, Chairman. The high needs block deficit is looking absolutely catastrophic. I mean, those figures are frightening. So forecast to be, I'm looking at paragraph 7.3 of the report, 17.5 million as at March this year, so 2025, increasing to 30 million by March next year. I mean, it's always been a bit of a problem, but the figures we were looking at, even just a few years ago, 5, 6, 7, 8, that just looks like an exponential increase. Can you give us a brief overview as to why it's going up so much and so fast?
So, as I say, we've remodeled it, and our understanding through the modelling is just simply the demand and the cost of servicing that demand. So the needs which the children in West Berkshire are having to be serviced.
Well, thanks for the answer, and I don't doubt you're right, but I mean that we're seeing so many more children with complex needs.
So just sorry to interrupt, Councillor McKinnon. So just as an order of magnitude, we roughly have just under 1,700 children who have care packages in West Berkshire. So we're having to, in some way, look after them with different types of packages.
I think I'm right in saying that, okay, for the majority of those children, the care packages, okay, they come at a cost, but they're not, they're not ridiculous costs. But for a minority of packages, even just one extra demand can put a great deal of pressure on the budget. Yeah.
So we've got instances where a particular child could be costing us anywhere between £5,000 to £10,000 per week.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Cossingham. Couple more from me, and then I will give way to colleagues. Again, 7.3. So the deficit is the final sentence here. So it's still talking about the high needs block deficit. The comment is the deficit is effectively reducing working capital amounts in the council's balance sheet. And I get that, that's fine. And also increasing our overall borrowing requirements. Again, why is it doing that? Just in simple terms, if you don't mind.
So to actually fund the deficit, so as you know, from a revenue accounting perspective, we can't be seen, we cannot pay for education from our revenue budget. However, to fund the deficit, we actually have to borrow, in essence, what someone else is spending in reality. So we're actually having to borrow that amount just to cope with the increased cost of demand. But also on top of that, we've got the finance funding, which is actually going through the revenue accounts as well. So just to service the debt, we're looking at a roughly £1.5 million? 1.3 million.
And that's the repayment cost of the borrowing?
That's the interest and also the MRP, just the interest? Just the interest. So on top of that, we'll have the MRP to put into the revenue account as well.
So to get that straight then, so if the deficit's forecast to be 17.5 million in March, and next year it's forecast to be 30 million, assume that figure turns out. So that's 12.5 million quid that the deficit's going up by. We have to borrow that money, pass it to the schools for them to spend as part of their revenue budget, if you like.
Yep. Yes, that's my understanding.
Thank you. And final one for me on page paragraph 7.5, so just a couple of paragraphs down. Second sentence, the council applies a local best practice rule that annual capital financing costs as a percentage should not exceed 10% of the council's net revenue stream. The table below indicates, assuming assumptions, that we're going to be compliant with this rule at the conclusion of the MTFS. At the conclusion of the MTFS, it looks like we're spending 11.11%, which is higher than 10. I just wondered if you could explain that one.
That is the current projection. What I would say that is with the current funding, which requirements we have, and the fact that we've extrapolated what we know. The government haven't disclosed what their new funding arrangement's going to be. They did come out just before Christmas based upon deprivation. We didn't do as well as other councils. I know it's a good measure. Some people say it's a good measure to measure on deprivation. So I think Blackpool got 9.3%. We didn't get anywhere near as that. We obviously have more complex, having an aging population. We have, in essence, probably more complex needs from an adult social care perspective regarding dementia, Alzheimer's, etc. That 11.1%, yes, that's what we're extrapolating for years to come. Who knows whether or not that will be? It's more of a crystal ball. I have. Yeah, sure.
Joseph and Shannon are both indicating they want to say something on this.
Yeah, thank you through you, Chair. I think as well the important thing with that percentage figure, that includes the high needs block deficit. So I think that sort of local rule is generally sort of excluding high needs block deficit. And I think what that is showing is that cost of financing that is pushing the council potentially by the end of the MTFS above that figure.
If I can, those are actually really useful answers. It wasn't quite the point I was making, which is that if the rule is that we don't exceed 10% and the statement just above the table says we're going to be compliant with that, 11.11% isn't compliant with that rule. So the statement would be wrong. Shannon.
Yeah. There is a missing knot. The knot will go in by the time we get to council.
That's an important knot. Thank you. A Gordian knot. Thank you. That was it. I'm not going to ask any questions about the implementation of IFRS 16 leases. Maybe we could chat about that later on, but I'll spare everybody that.
Thank you. And that's a good point actually about the papers. As we know, there was a misquote in one of the papers. There was a contradiction, I think, between the MTFS and the revenue papers about what might happen if we don't get the exceptional financial support. So we do need to make sure that those papers are cross-referenced and are accurate, because it's really important. The points that Councillor McKinnon's just made, obviously, if we knew that there was a missing word, that would have changed our understanding of it.
I'm absolutely sure they will be. And, given some of the disruption that the guys have had to face over the last few weeks, we'll forgive them a few typos.
Yeah, thank you. Councillor Bowick, thank you for your patience.
Thank you, Chairman. Can I go back to Councillor Collingham, back to the high needs block? And the forecast is from 17.5 million by the end of next month to 30 million, almost double. Now I think, with all respect, you kind of brushed it off a bit by saying, needs are increasing and costs are going up. Get all that, but when you say the needs are increasing, the children are the children. We haven't got a massive population increase, except the point entirely that individual children sometimes require exceedingly expensive packages. But we know who those children are already, don't we? Unless it's a provision just in case some demand, unexpected demand comes along. And then to continue to assume a £15 million increase every year, it's completely unsustainable, isn't it? So you said you said, oh, we've remodeled it. Well, could you say a bit more about that? Because we've forecast £17.5 million. So when was the remodelling done, and why was it wrong before?
So thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Burke. I think this, as I say, we're well aware of the fact that, unfortunately, through COVID, children coming into education are not school ready. I think it's been proven the fact that the number of children which we're having to come into the school network are have increased needs, increased requirements. And that's what we're seeing. It is, as I say, the feedback which we're getting from schools, the actual increase in need has been very much driven by what's been happening in society, what's happened from COVID, children not being ready for school. It's...
I completely get that, but it's this hugely rapid acceleration that I'm struggling with. You know, I'll go back to what I said earlier on. We know the children are, broadly speaking, we know the numbers. The numbers are not increasing by 40%, whatever it is, from this year to next, are they? There's not 40% more children who need extra help.
Mr. Holmes, do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, thank you through you, Chair. I don't know the figures exactly off the top of my head, Councillor Bowick, on the increases. We absolutely are seeing a significant increase in demand here. And just to give the national picture on this, so the forecasts are that by the end of 2025-26, the national deficit will be £4 billion, which in the following year will grow to £5.9 billion. So the deficit is increasing by 50% every single year, which is not too far away from the reflection of the position that we are in here at the moment in West Berkshire. So we can get you the figures on the increase. I don't know if it's been to scrutiny before or not, because I know there has been some discussion around SEND, but we can get the individual figures.
Yes, we have looked at SEND, a few months ago. Councillor Bowick, have you, finished? Okay.
Thank you for your answers.
Councillor Pattenden and then Councillor Dick.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just to look at that number from a slightly different perspective. I mean, it's a big number and it's growing rapidly. But you know, if we didn't spend that money in March 26, what wouldn't we be able to do? Which children wouldn't we be able to support? You know, what would the impact be? I think that would be useful to know if we can. Thank you.
Councillor
I must admit, I have. That's quite a detailed question, which I don't have the answer to. As I say, it's a case of the fact that you know, we as a council, we want to support the most vulnerable children, people in society. So we have a duty of care to do so. So to turn children away would be, I don't think we could do that. I'd say we have a statutory obligation to do the work which we do.
Mr. Holmes, did you want to?
Yeah, absolutely. Just supporting that, you know, so if a child has an EHCP and there's a whole legal framework behind the provision that of this, you know, care and support that we must provide. So this is why this whole issue is arising, is because, you know, we have these statutory obligations on the council to provide, you know, a level of care. At the same time, we've got this accounting statutory override to not present the deficit as it is on our balance sheet, and the two sit there together.
Thank you. That's exactly the answer I wanted to hear. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Councillor Dick.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm going to stay on the same topic, and I'm absolutely not buying this at all. I made a few phone calls to similar authorities, and you'll all know that you can profile authorities so they have similar needs. The increases there, the ones that I picked up on, are very much less than this. Very much less than this. Now, you're quite right, Councillor Pattenden. Early intervention and meeting children's needs is the most important thing in the world, in my opinion, always has been and still is. But I just don't believe these numbers. I really don't. Councillor Brooke said, we know who these children are, and we do, apart from one cohort, children who are just coming into school. Now, some of them are going to have needs. COVID has done more damage to schools than people want to acknowledge, which again, there are reasons for that. But these children won't have been properly assessed yet. So in terms of significant special needs, we don't really know yet, because until they're in the system, and it takes a year, 2 years for the system to waken up to them, and that's wrong, but that's the way it's been forever. So I think we need to look again at those numbers. They are unsustainable. We have a limited resource in total. We need to spend it wisely, carefully and sensibly, and those numbers don't suggest that. I want to go past that and say, well, what do you do about it? Because everyone just says, oh, well, the poor children and they keep coming. Well, there's a limit to the size of the need growing. And to me, what can be done about it? Now, to be fair, West Berkshire Council over the last 10 years has invested some monies in internal resource. So I can guarantee you, for example, with one particular disability, it cost 1/6 to provide in a unit in West Berkshire what it was costing on the open market. And when you've got a child with particularly special needs that mainstream don't cope with, and you've got to go out there and find it, you're at the mercy, the mercy of the market, and the numbers are enormous. And it's quite right, a few individuals cost thousands a day, almost, some of them. But I would urge us to look at the size, don't accept those numbers, drill down into those again, and then say, well, how can we control them? And one of the ways is to look at inside West Berkshire or close to West Berkshire, sponsor some more units to meet special needs, because you don't need big cohorts. Some of the units we've got cater for 6 children. And in fact, we opened a special school recently, didn't we? Or sorry, in the planning committee we agreed to, but it wasn't sponsored by West Berkshire. It was a company from outside the council, again, but meeting a really, really important need. So I want to leave that out there. And while I've got the floor, because you don't want to hear me too much, in terms of, thank you, Councillor, I meant that, the capital needs of schools, there was a little bit of a fuss earlier in the year about special needs. We're going to take money from schools for special needs centrally. Visits were held to try and calm the schools, and most of them were promised all sorts of things that would be done, but mostly capital rather than what they really wanted. But that's okay. Can I be assured that every single thing that was promised to the various schools that were visited, those items are all costed and in the capital programme? Thank you.
Yeah, we'll come on to the capital budget. Yeah. Thank you very much, Councillor Dick. Councillor Amatharaj.
Thank you, Chairman. I think I'll stay on to the high need blocks question, but a slightly different one. I want to cover the topic of the CFR breach. Section 7.3, it says that the loans to CFR will breach the overarching CFR in 27-28. Given this situation, what is our contingency plans to avoid this situation? I know West Berkshire will not be unique to this situation. We will be in a similar situation like other councils, but we want to be ahead of them and have some contingency plans. And particularly, we want to understand if the exceptional financial support is not approved, what is our absolute threshold in terms of that this breach will absolutely happen, and contingency. So I want to focus on the contingency, not pinpointing, or we are in this situation, I know, but what is our contingency plans? I have another question on the strategy question, but just on this one.
Do you want to answer that first, Councillor Cottingham?
Can you give a bit more clarification on the question? So contingency, what do you mean by the contingency?
The contingency plans to avoid this breach. So 7.3 says that loan CFR is to breach the overarching CFR. Projection is it will happen in 27-28 financial year. So just looking ahead for 2 years' time, so if it breaches, if this happens, what's that?
This is all to do with the DSG override. So it would be a case of hopefully by 27, the fact that the government would have done something to resolve this. So at the moment, as I said earlier, the fact that they have plans for 2026, this is when it all comes to fruition, and whether or not they will write it off in 2026/27, which then removes it from us having need to finance it. So we're having to finance something which, in essence, we don't have any control over.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay.
I have one question on the medium strategy.
Okay.
On the investment and borrowing strategy, it is clear. I don't want to go into the numbers, but just on the return on investments in page 19, I just wanted to go through the numbers. In terms of this average returns, how does it risk profile, investment risk profile align with the SIPFA guidelines? And then this current situation of this interest rates being reduced, but there is always an economic uncertainty with Trump plans and all this stuff. But just wanting to understand what is that sufficient plans to ensure a sufficient liquidity position for us in terms of this investment.
Which part of the report?
It's section 8.4, page 19. Just on the rate of return section.
Yeah. So you have two elements to the rate of return. So you have the commercial property rate of return, which is diminishing through the fact that we are disposing. We have a program of a disposal, and then you then have the actual investments which we have for our cash, roughly 10 million, which we have on deposit. Also, it'll depend on the needs of us being able to draw down on that cash. So you can have short term on deposit, you can have long term on deposit. So it's again, who knows what the interest rates are going to be in 2 or 3 years' time, but we've taken a prudent approach of reducing those returns because we foresee interest rates falling over a period of time. So yeah, it's not a huge revenue stream for us, but you're very, as I say, observant to say it is a source of income. However, we have more of an upside by the fact that interest which we pay on our borrowings, which will reduce.
Okay, thank you. And just on this point, just clarifying, that's a negative return rate forecast for the 27-28, although it's not the significant one, it will not affect our liquidity position.
No.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Vickers.
Sorry, I'm going back a little bit to a remark Councillor Cottingham made about what sounded like sort of preventable special needs. So I had been to the dentist today, so I might be talking a bit oddly. When you talked about speech problems and various things like that, these are preventable special needs, a sort of lower level where we work in conjunction with our health partners here. Surely we're not looking at these continuing now that and some of it might have been related to COVID. I mean, do we feel that we're working well with our health partners? Are they pulling their weight? I mean, we've seen in here that we have got some services where we're trying to provide outreach services for families that might be missing out, such as rural areas. And this is where West Berkshire does suffer to other areas because it does have rurality, which means that a lot of families do miss out and it's more difficult to provide services there. But do we feel that our health partners are working with us here, or is that a struggle?
I haven't heard anything from either the portfolio holder for children nor from the executive director that we're not working well with all of the holistic providers across West Berkshire to make sure that our prevention strategy is working as well as it could be and should be working. I'm not aware of any issues.
Thank you.
Thank you. I've got a couple of questions, if I may. Sorry, I beg your pardon. Yes, okay, yeah.
Thank you. There are a couple of comments made earlier on, which kind of made me feel a bit uncomfortable. I want to make my position absolutely clear here. In no way am I suggesting that we should not be supporting our children with special needs. Absolutely. It's our prime objective as a council, isn't it, after all? Councillor Dick made some really good points, and I'm going to go back now to the briefing that we had on the 9th of February last year from the LGA team who presented the results of the peer review. And I can remember Councillor Rory Love saying that this administration needs to look at the thresholds that underpin the provision of our special needs services. So my question to the administration is, and you don't have to answer it now, I'm sure, you know, this, unless you have the answer at your fingertips. Have you looked at the thresholds? If not, why not? And if you have you decided to keep them to preserve our existing thresholds?
I think if Anne-Marie Dodds was with us this evening, she'd be able to
I'm sure she will.
cast light on this. Thank you for clarifying the point that you made, Councillor Bowick. Do you have anything to say on that, Councillor Cottingham? I mean, we are going to be looking at the special educational needs again it's not going to be the next meeting, unfortunately. We'll come on to that later. It's going to be after that. But we will dive into that in a lot more detail. But Councillor Cottingham, did you want to comment on that?
I'd just say that both Councillor Dick and Councillor Bowick make very valid points over thresholds. Also, without extension commissioning, are we getting the best value with the needs which our children have? It is a bone of contention, the fact that it's unregulated, so we're at the mercy of the market of what's being supplied to us, and there is a competition to get these places. And yeah, we have spoken with the other councils in Berkshire about creating our own internal provision regarding children's homes, etc. Economies of scale. I think we're well aware of the history of why councils de-risked from this area 20, 30 years ago with all of the incidents regarding safeguarding, etc. I think the pendulum has swung too much to the private sector. I think there needs to be a more competitive internal market on this. This is me speaking personally. We're well aware of sovereign wealth funds, venture capitalist hedge funds profiteering from our children and profiteering from council taxpayers. It's not fair. It's not right. And as I say, I just hope the government of the day grab this and see the fact that it's unsustainable. I think it's as I say, we cannot keep on feeding more and more money into a bottomless pit. And the way in which it's accounted for is encouraging this.
Thank you, Councillor Cottingham. I think we can all agree that the government need to get a grip on this issue as well and can't just keep kicking the can down the road.
Chairman, sorry, but
yeah.
so do we, and
Yeah.
look at growing our own.
Yeah.
We just to come back, Councillor Dick. Yeah, we've spoken about growing our own, and as I say, we're evaluating the various options. We've had discussions, as I say, with the other Berkshire authorities as well on this.
Okay, great. I will go back to my couple of questions, then I'll bring in Councillor Reid if that's okay. You mentioned earlier that we need to sell some more of the commercial property to pay back some of the debt that we have. Are we fairly confident about being able to make more sell-offs in the future? I know that we've had discussions in various forums in the past about sensitivities, and we obviously don't want to talk in a great deal of detail because people that might be interested in buying them might be listening. But are you able to say anything about your confidence with regard to getting a good deal on some of these properties?
So part of the procurement process, Chair, we've had a change in provider who's looking after our commercial property portfolio. We had a very extensive meeting in the new year, which Councillor Wollaston attended. It was a very detailed meeting. They suggested a particular strategy to dispose of our assets in line with the strategy which we have. And I can't really, obviously for commercial reasons, part two, I can't disclose what that strategy is. They were fairly confident, as I say, it's a robust strategy. Again, we're at the mercy of the market regarding getting what we believe to be a fair price, which is a function of interest rates against the yield. So as interest rates go down, the property price goes up. But we have the added complication of ensuring that we have to have in essence, a capital receipt this financial year. So we do have plan A, plan B, plan C to make that happen.
Great. And I was looking back at the minutes of last year's meeting and we were told that there's a sinking fund of £2 million over 10 years for maintenance. Obviously, the longer we keep those properties, the longer we have to maintain them. Is that looking like a similar kind of figure or are those costs ramping up?
Chair, I think that was, we needed to provide a sinking fund. I'm not aware that we've actually specifically made a sinking fund, but there will come a time whereby, yes, we will have to divert some of the commercial rent to make sure that the actual assets are not dilapidating
Yeah.
That's the right word.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Reid.
Thank you, Chair. I think we all have our own sort of focus when we look at these papers, and most people know by now that I just look at, well, I don't just look, but I tend to look first for risk and then resilience is the next thing. And I was reassured that risk is mentioned 123 times and resilience 19 times, all in different aspects of the paper. However, going back to the DSG high needs block and thinking about the risk there, is if we didn't put that, use that model, put that money aside, would we not also be exposing ourselves to not only higher levels of complaints, but managing significant number of ombudsman's requests, which can often usually fall for the child, quite rightfully, but also facing more legally rigorous challenges as well if we didn't put that money aside and budget for that.
Yes, in a nutshell, we would leave ourselves open to legal challenge. It's fair to say that we've also seen a change in attitude. So we're actually well aware that we're having no win, no fee ambulance chasing lawyers moving into the space, saying I can get your child a EHCP. So it's a real, as I say, complicated area. So we have to comply with the regulations. I think the government of the day changed the actual threshold, reduced the threshold for a particular EHCP, so it makes it easier. If we do challenge and we get taken to court, invariably the judge will side, go on the side of the child, as they will, and quite rightly so in circumstances that no one wants to put a child at jeopardy. But we're in a situation whereby, as I say, we have to do what we do. We have a statutory obligation. If we don't do it, we will face the consequences.
Thank you.
Okay, great. Just one final question for me, Councillor Cottingham. Can you outline for us what our plans are around artificial intelligence? Because obviously that's one way that we could potentially save some funds in the future. And I'm conscious that we're involved in an incubator for AI. Are you able to summarise for us?
Thank you, Chair. So we have 3 projects which we've been trialling. You've got Magic Notes and Copilot. So Magic Notes, colleague to my right regarding adult social care. So basically, when we have a care package being assessed, so someone going to someone's house, they switch on AI with the permission of the person who has been interviewed. And what happens is the artificial intelligence, in essence, writes up the actual meeting notes into a pro forma template, which has been designed with the supplier. They get to the next, so they drive to the next interview, and they're sitting in the car. They read the notes, they then press the button, and it goes to their manager to approve. So we're actually saving time and energy by the person not having to write up their notes. They get the report. What we're not doing, which I fully agree on, you're probably well aware with the fact that you have AI, but also you have generative AI. And what generative AI has been proven to do, it makes things up. So the fact that we're not wanting AI, even though it is closed AI, to make the clinical decision. So it is being reviewed by a human, and humans are making the decision. We're not relying on machines to decide what care packages are being made. We're also, as I say, using Copilot regarding meeting minute notes, and also within the papers, we're using AI regarding from monitoring the roads within West Berkshire for gritting purposes. So there are many opportunities to use AI, not least report writing as well, to make sure, as I say, that we have a lot of data, a lot of information, which can be consolidated, and hopefully the press of the button and we then just review the report rather than spending, as I say, many hours writing reports. So yes, I think there is numerous ways in which AI can be used, especially in adult social care regarding monitoring individuals at home. I think there's lots of good work being done, both within the district, but also within local government.
Yeah. So are we confident that any investment we're making in AI is going to see good returns in terms of the staff hours saved?
Yeah, my perception, yes, it is. And it's part of the transformation programme as well. So you have under Gabrielle's leadership, looking at where we can use opportunities for AI.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Councillor Cottingham. Any other questions on investment and borrowing? No, I think we've gone through that pretty thoroughly. Mr Oliver, can I just confirm that the draft minutes of this meeting will be seen by Councillor Cottingham and officers ahead of the full council meeting at the end of February, just so that they can see all of the points that we've captured?
Yes, I should be able to do this within about a week. So
Brilliant.
not a problem.
Using AI. Good. Because it's obviously important that officers and Councillor Cottingham are able to see the what we've discussed tonight. So I won't go through and summarise everything that we've talked about, because I don't think that's necessary to go over that again. Right, so we move on to medium-term financial strategy. Over to you again, Councillor Cottingham. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So moving on to the MTFS, which is commonly known as, which is the extension stroke forecast of where we're going to be financially. Probably well worth, as I say, part of the introduction is looking at table 4.2, which really highlights the pressures which we as a council have faced over the last couple of years. So as you can see, if you take those three categories of adult social care, children's social care, home to school transport, they've increased significantly from an actual spend of 81.3 million to this year's, the projection for this year's year end of 102 million, which is a 20.7 million increase, which is 25%. Whereas our actual revenue, what we get to spend, has increased by 10.7%, 16 million. So immediately, without the other items within our budget, we have a 4.7 million gap just on those three items, which account for, as I say, ever increasing amount of the pie which we have to spend. So our statutory spend is increasing even more, which then puts pressure on the non-statutory stuff which we have to do, which, as I say, means that we have even more savings to be able to achieve. So without the saving programme which we've put in place in those three areas, that 102 million would be many, many millions more. So that gives a sort of bit of context to where we are with financially. Also within the report, if I move on to section 5.4, we talked about earlier regarding the exceptional financial support letter, which was written on the 9th of January to the Minister for Housing, Communities and Local Government, requesting £16 million. So that actual 16 million was split between 13 million being added to this current financial year 24-25 to increase our reserves, with a further 3 million for 25-26 to fund a gap in the revenue account. So that is, as I say, really key to understand, is that the 13 million is not to be essence spent on particular projects. We will be able to reach, the projection is that our year end landing will be roughly 3.4 million of reserves. With the exceptional financial support to increase our reserves, that will go up to 16.4 million, roughly between 8 to 9% of our annual spend, which is above the section 151 officers recommended 5% as being the minimum level. So it brings us more in line into what our reserves have been in previous years as a council. So if, as I say, if you look at page, go to section 3 of the second section, you've got an overview of where we are with regarding the expected landing for 25-26. Something just to be of note is the collection fund deficit of 5.6 million. So that is, in essence, the difference between what we're expecting to collect in council tax and what we will be collecting. So this is really sort of a catch up where we are. So again, the projections of our council tax revenue, we have to account for what the difference, because we all have to project forward, and this is just really us catching up with what actually we will collect. We talked about, as I say, onto the revenue budget. We have to, we've identified £8.2 million worth of savings, 10A, 10B for next current financial year. And within the actual MTFS, we have the use of the exceptional financial support, which is 16B of 3 million. So we had to find, in essence, £11.2 million worth of savings or exceptional financial support to make things balance for 25-26. As I indicated, for 26, 27, 27, 28, 28, 29, we can extrapolate what we know now, but to say the government have yet to announce what their full funding arrangements are going to be. So there is a certain amount of forecasting with what we know. It's likely these numbers will change. So it's really, as I say, an extrapolation of where we are.
Thank you, Councillor Cotton. Questions, members? Councillor Matharaj.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Ian, for brief. I want to focus on the section 4.2, the table. I think you've given that picture from the council to us, not just this committee, but for the public as well to look at. I think this table should be all over the place for us to understand as a council and public as well, how much of this spend is increasing year on year. Just on this table alone, I'm not seeing this in the subsequent table. What's the projection for the next 2 years, for 25, 26?
Good question.
And on this figure, I'm not sure how much of this is, what's the right word to use? Is it match funding or ring fence from the central government? Because we are spending, is it a total spend of 101 million or on near to 102 million, the total spend, or just the council's, West Berkshire Council Fund spending, and then some part funded from the central government? And staying on this one, can we have a discussion with the central government? I don't know if there's a possibility to have that funding from central government increase in addition to the projection increase in our spending forecast, because the year on year, if you are able to realize that we are expected to spend more on the critical services, adult social care and children's services, are we not in a position to request the government to say, like, look, we need to be in a position to demand more from them? Yeah. Effectively, what I'm trying to say is that our spending remains the same for the next 3 years, so we don't go into that negative position, but central government offsetting that increase in the spending.
Thank you, Councillor Armitage, for your question. So to answer the first one, if you go to page, if you go to the table 3, which is the MTFS in detail, and if you go to line 8C, which is the model growth, that is the model growth for adult social care, children and family services. So as you can see, that this next year's budget's increasing by 8.1 million. The year after, 8.5, 7 million, 6 million. So that is the increase in demand. You've got both the price and volume. With regard to asking the government or lobbying the government, I think they're well aware of the fact that they need to grab hold of adult social care, cradle to grave care. The fact that they're asking more and more of local authorities without providing the necessary funds. And as I said earlier, medical care gets better. We have people living longer and have more complicated needs as they live longer. And that is a fact of life. So it is probably a wider question for society of how do we want to treat people in old age? And if we want world-class service, we have to make sure there is sufficient funding for this. I don't have the answer to this. I think numerous governments have tried and no one has come up with a solution. And my belief is that it has to be a cross-party, non-partisan solution. I think it affects everyone in the room, whether they are blue, red, yellow, or purple, whatever the Reform Party is colour. Green, yes, yeah, green as well.
I think we could all agree with that, Councillor Cotton. It's one of these issues that needs to be grasped for the long term. In the figures, it says if you look at adult social care, children's social care and home to school transport, in total, that's 61.9% of our net revenue budget. So that's the kind of challenge that we and indeed all councils are dealing with.
So just to add to that, so I know there is other alternative statistics. So the government also have, is it core spending power? And for core spending power, it's actually approaching nearly 80%. So it's north of 75% at the end of this current financial year, and it's approaching nearly 80% of our core spending power.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. Councillor Amatharaj. Yeah.
Chairman, thank you for allowing me to ask not a supplementary question, but in relation to this question on the lobbying side. I know you're looking at potential avenues or ways to increase the revenue. We'll come to that topic on the revenue one, Ian. But just on this section 3.1, it says the retained business rates and the new homes bonus. Just wanting to understand, are we in a position again to lobby or request for retaining more of the business rates than what we are supposed to give back to government? And then I'm conscious that the new bonus scheme, homes bonus scheme, is ending in 26-27. So are we in a position to just go back to government and extend that one so we keep getting that money to fill our deficit?
So to answer your question, Councillor Amatharaj, is my understanding is the retained business rate is a set formula set by Whitehall, so we have to comply with that. And they will be reviewing the business rate formula. Do we have a date? I think it's...
Yeah, thank you. Through Chairman. So there'll be some fundamental reforms happening in 2025 around the retention of business rates, whether there may or may not be a full, partial or no reset of business rate baseline. My suspicion is there's going to be some.
And you're quite right to identify the fact that we collect 90 million and we only get to keep 30. Another 10 million would be very, very grateful, very well received. It would go a long way to alleviate some of the financial pressures which we face.
Thank you. Any other questions, members? Councillor McKinnon.
Thank you very much, Chairman. So, Councillor Cottingham, the emergency financial support application is going to dominate discussion a little bit, but we can see that the use of that to actually balance the revenue budget is only forecast here for 25-26. Is that right? So that's going straight into the revenue budget. The rest of it's going into reserves. That is the case. My thunder was stolen a wee bit there on business rates. I was about to make that exact same point. So, you know, I've had conversations with quite a few residents who say that, look, you know, we live in an area that's relatively affluent, relatively compared to some other areas of the country. Lots of big businesses are here. You know, why do we not see the benefit of the business rates? And it's quite stark, isn't it? Was it 90 million business rates is raised within West Berkshire, and we get to keep just about a third of it. And you know, I wonder what is was that, sorry? Was it 125 million?
No,
I heard
90 million.
I heard 90 million, I think. I'll stick with 90. But even keeping a third of it, is a lot of residents round my way in Bradfield and in Southampton and Burfield think that they're getting a bit of a raw deal on that. Is there any prospect of the government looking at that in the future?
Yeah, thank you through you, Chair. I mean, the government are going to be looking at this exact issue in 2025. Now, previously, there was talk of local councils being able to set their own multiplier, for instance, on business rates. That doesn't seem to be on the table quite at the moment, but we will see. So absolutely, central government are looking at this. my instinct would probably say that here in West Berkshire, it is likely that we'll probably retain lower levels of business rates into the future, but we will have to see what comes out in the coming months from central government around this.
Okay, thanks for that. I've got a few other questions actually, but they're related to the revenue budget for this year, so I might cool my jets on that until we get to that one. Just one, you mentioned the collection fund deficit of 5.6 million, and if I understand that correctly, that's the gap between what residents owe in their council tax bills for 25-26 and what we think we will collect. So 5.6 million is an awful lot of money that the council is due but is not collecting. What is driving that, and what can we do about it?
So, Councillor McKinney, it also includes business rates as well. So it's not just council tax, it's also business rates. My understanding of our collection dunning process, we're 99% was the latest number I seem to remember. 99.5% is our collection rate.
My mental maths is struggling with that one.
So that on 120 million for council tax, 0.5%, so you're looking there around about 700k of bad debt in reality.
Right, so I guess what's the breakdown of the 5.6 million?
So that is over, that's my understanding, is over a period of time. I know Shannon gave me a briefing. I'll hand over to Shannon, who's probably is more detail on how it's made up.
Thank you. £1 million of that is roughly council tax, and the rest of it is the business rates. That is how it is broken down.
Thanks, Shannon. So 4.6 then, and is that business rates that we are due this year, or 25-26, that we don't think we'll collect?
It's a collection of them. So you've got some older ones, and it's mostly the current year.
Okay.
So there's a profile.
So without wanting to put words in your mouth, that's businesses going bust and then not paying the rates that are due.
It can be, so through you, Chair, it can be that, but it can also be if, for example, a business appeals their business rate valuation and is successful, that can reduce the debit down. So, and that volatility does exist and is a real impact to us. And a lot of our business rate debit at any one time will be under appeal by businesses wanting to lower their business rates.
And on that point, we have had revaluations which have impacted and led to this figure as well.
Lovely. And with that in mind, then just one follow-up on that. Those factors which give rise to that 5.6 million, those factors are likely to persist into future years, are they not? I mean, businesses will appeal their valuations, businesses will default on their rates, residents will default on their council tax. Why are we not seeing a collection fund deficit in the subsequent years in the MTFS?
Because it's still being modelled at present. Once it's finished being modelled, it will be entered in as part of our refresh of the MTFS.
Right, okay. So, and that remodel is not going to leave it at zero, it's probably fair to say. So actually the savings requirement in future years will be even more severe.
Mr. Holmes.
I think all of that will come through the government changes, which will be coming in for 26-27, because I think all of this system of how much money gets removed from business rates from certain parts of the country gets redistributed around will change. So I think there'll be quite a fundamental shift to actually how the MTFS looks. I suspect on certain bits of the formula, for example, adult social care areas where the formula has not been adjusted for many years, we may well do better than we do currently. But for things like business rate reset, I suspect we'll probably do worse off as part of that. So there will be a really significant shift to how the face of the MTFS looks.
Okay, thanks very much.
Councillor Cottingham.
I'm in danger of asking a question myself over this. So the 4.6 million, do we take the 100% hit? Because if we're collecting everything and only get to keep a third, surely we shouldn't be taking the 4.6 in its entirety, because that's netting down from 4.6 down to 25 million. That doesn't seem very fair, that we're taking the complete hit on the collection, whereas we get no benefit through the fact that, yeah.
We only have the West Berkshire element. The collection fund deficit is a bigger number. This is the West Berkshire element of it included in our MTFS.
Okay, happy members? Yeah, fabulous. Any other questions? I'd quite like to ask a question about whether or not we have modelled in any potential impact as a result of the local government reorganisation. For members of the public who might not be aware of this, the government is proposing that there is a reorganisation locally so that we have unitary authorities across the country of a minimum of 500,000 people, and then we have above that a strategic authority with a mayor. Obviously, there's a lot of conversations going on behind the scenes across the whole country at the moment about who might get into bed with who, as it were. Do we have any idea at all about what that impact might be, or are we, you know,
No idea. Too soon.
Yeah.
It would be impossible to model at the moment.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mr. Holmes, I see your hand.
I was going to say something through Chair. They say something very similar, and actually, when this was produced, that devolution white paper was only just coming through. So I think it'd be too soon to say now what the potential future might look like. Some of those upsides, downsides, shares of reserve, all of that. It is not in there, and I think at the moment it's probably safer to keep it like this, because all other councils will be going on this basis as well. And we'll undoubtedly get into further conversations in the coming months on this.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much for that. Yeah, it's a bit like 3D chess at the moment, isn't it? It's very difficult to know. And I don't think the government are proposing to give any extra money as part of this reorganisation, which is not particularly helpful. Anyway. Right, thank you very much for that, members. So we'll move on now to item 8, the capital strategy. Over to Councillor Cottingham again. Thank you very much, Chair. So this details the capital strategy from 25-26 to 28-29. So in essence, what we are going to be spending capital expenditure on. And I think, as I say, for next financial year, we've talked earlier about the 73 million. There is, I noticed in the paper, a slight typo in 7.3, which refers to having 1 day's worth of funds. In fact, it's one week's worth of funds. So we have in section 5.4, we have the actual amount of spend which we're looking to provide to the residents of West Berkshire for the next financial year. We also have a more detailed analysis of that spend in one of the appendix, in Appendix A, and some of the highlights for residents who have dialed in. We've talked earlier about spending money on schools. So we've got Brookfield School having roughly 1.7 million to lots there. We've got Falkland Primary School having classroom improvement of 2.4 million. We have field station improvement of 3.9 million. We have EV charging points of just under $1 million. Occupational therapy equipment of over $1 million. Enhancing our educational capital programme of 3.8 million. We've talked earlier about the solar farm as well, 18.6 million. Really important to the most vulnerable people in society. We have disabled facility grants where we improve people's homes. So again, from a preventative care perspective, spending on our roads, so road improvement of 12.1 million, drainage improvement of 1.7 million, active travel of 1.7 million, special educational needs and disability infrastructure of 1.7 million, and something from an environmental perspective, we have a 2.4 million external grant for nutrient neutrality with regarding the River Lambourne. So there is a very extensive programme which we have put together from a bottom-up perspective to deliver. As I say, the fact that it is here to build for the future. We recognise the fact that obviously we're facing revenue accounting issues, but there is sufficient headroom with regarding our both internal and external borrowing to be able to accommodate this ambitious capital expenditure programme
which is in line with the wider capital expenditure programme which the previous administration put together as well. So we're just carrying on with, as I say, building for residents in West Berkshire.
Thank you, Councillor Costigan. Councillor Amatharaj.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you. And again, first, I'd like to applaud, and I've said it in last year as well. So the funding, the capital program is giving a picture of how this is spread across the top 5 priorities, council priorities. It is really useful to see the funding distributed to manage those priorities or achieve those priority vision. But I'd like to point out, I won't go line by line. I'll just pick up 2 points and clarify this from you. 8B appendix for the detailed capital funding program. So first one is the flooding. We talked about flooding in this district in the last year and this year. I could just see one line item there, drainage and flood risk projects. The 700K has been earmarked. And what my question on this one is, the 700K is earmarked for number of projects. We don't need to go in the details. I'm particularly sure it will be focusing on the Kennet and Lambon flooding areas. But what is interesting or rather strange is that funding is coming from the external, or that is outside, but no West Berkshire funding. So are we implying that we as a council are not putting investment or money into our own flood prevention programs? Similar one is the footpath improvement one. There is a funding of 100K there. I just wanted to draw to the similar question of, it's again external, not council's funding there. So it's something which is these kind of essential programs. We are looking at external funding and not putting our own money. Is it because we don't have enough money, or is it just lower priority?
So thank you for your question, Councillor Amatharaj. No, it's the fact that this particular type of work will be funded by a grant from the Environment Agency, so part of their wider programme regarding flood defences. So when we say external, as I say, we will have sources of grants. It's not that the fact we're borrowing it, it's actually money coming from the central pot, from central government.
Sorry, and my question is rather, but there is no West Berkshire equivalent to this match funding, or so it's zero. What I'm trying to say is that, are we implying that there is no money to allocate for this funding? It's just 100% from EA, for example. So I would have liked to see, okay, there is a percentage of money coming from EA, but it is our West Berkshire investment for flood prevention, which is going to match those funding, or at least match or part of that one, to show that, okay, we are investing in our flood prevention.
I think to rephrase your question is to say, do we believe 700K to be sufficient to cover our flood needs and requirements, and the fact that you would have liked to see extra money being put into this area regarding from a West Berkshire perspective?
I would always see extra money required for flood, but there's no such thing as like this is sufficient to prevent the kind of flooding we've seen in the last 2 years or so recently. But my only point is drawn towards that match funding that currently, when I look at the column of West Berkshire amount, it's zero. So just wanting to understand, is it something which we can look at and see like our own investment is there to these schemes?
So the relevant service director, executive director, if they felt they required extra funding, would have made a request. But I think it probably something for a wider question, potentially for scrutiny, to say, have we putting enough resources into flooding prevention as a council? So we're well aware of the fact that we have a climate emergency, we have extra rainfall, the fact that flooding risk is increasing. What can be done to, as I say, prevent properties, lives being blighted by the risk of flooding, the actual happening of flooding? We're in West Berkshire, so we do have a number of rivers running through. We do have flooding risk. So yeah,
I think it's unfortunate that the Section 18 report into last year's flooding hasn't been published yet. I think it's going to executive soon. And that's the kind of report that would help to feed into this decision making about what we needed to invest in future. And I'm conscious that other councils actually published theirs last summer. So I think that's a lesson that we need to learn in future to get that kind of document published sooner. Does that answer your question, yeah? I think.
Thank you, Chairman. I think, as Ian said, we can look into the future funding for next year programs and subsequent years to look at how this is kind of, as you say, the internal survey or internal investigation from our own departments feed into the investment program.
Yeah, thank you. I'm going to go to Councillor Reid.
Just initially sort of general question on the external funding. I'm assuming most of that's going to come from grants or other sources.
So within the report, it does distinguish between our requirements for external and self-funding. So if you go to table 6.1, so you have the external funding, but we haven't got it broken down between what we're having to say go to Public Works Loan Board or going to the Wealth Fund. Okay. So to answer the question, just looking at a table which Shannon is showing to me, of that 37 million, 28 million of it is coming from grants. So you're looking around about 9 million of external funding.
That sounds fantastic to be able to secure that grant, and maybe that kind of counteracts some of the loss of revenue out of the districts on business rates, a small amount, but not the full 90 million, which I think we're all looking for. The other question, and I regularly get quite a hard time at Bucklebury Parish Council, giving my district council report, and budget time is one that they definitely all wake up on. And the one that I was challenged on most was around the solar farm investment. Taking the particular point, I assume that the farms of Bloomfield Hatch and Clappers Farm are council-owned property. Why would we venture into an area that commercial organisations typically go into and taking risk? So I'm looking, put my risk bit on there, rather than just leasing the land to commercial organisations to run the solar farms themselves.
So I suppose in a nutshell is that if you use a commercial organisation to do this, you lose control. And the fact that there is obviously the green agenda, which we have to be net neutral, but also potentially you then lose the benefit of in essence, the feed-in tariff. So whatever we would be receiving as selling the actual electric back to the grid, we wouldn't get the same commercial rate back. So in fact, this is a vest to say project. I think it would be doubtful we would generate any revenue at all for this. So we would just be a facilitator. So there is a net benefit to the actual MTFS. So this is, as I say, a commercial investment which we're making.
Okay, I understand that, but if you lease land, that's a guarantee. You can sign someone up for 40 years, you get an annual rent. It's significantly less, you know, maybe in certain areas of the land's not that high quality, they'll drive you down in price. I'm just wondering, because feed-in tariffs aren't guaranteed for life. Well, not that I know the electricity market well, but I'm guessing they're not going to sign up for lifetime prices. So it'd be interesting to know what is that balance on the risk that because it is a risk we're taking.
So part of what I've said there is also the fact that our manifesto stroke strategy ambition to be net zero. I think if we lease it, it won't count towards us, so we would have no hope of achieving that. So it wouldn't be our electric, it would be actually the owner of the lease of the solar farm would be able to sell these credits on the open market as well. So there is, I think, a market for offsetting. So yeah, which I think carbon credits there is a market for. So they have a value. So we wouldn't be able to achieve our ambition to be have net neutrality by 2030. I think is our plan within our within our manifesto and our strategy.
Okay, I'm just wondering. It does mention around that, but I'm just wondering if there can be a bit more wordage around the carbon credits and the fact that this is us doing our bit, not only just from the council, but I think there's government objectives to try and to achieve that. So it's doing our bit for the country as well.
Yeah, so I've been told that it will have a carbon reduction of 3,700 tonnes of CO2, just under 40% of the council's annual carbon emissions. So it makes quite a dent in our ambition.
Impressive figures, yes. Yeah. No, quite. If we can maybe highlight that a little bit more, I don't think I think we're underselling ourselves there.
I'm sure that when it comes to public relations around this, that's something that the council will be mindful of. Great. Councillor Pattenden.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, given the debate that we had earlier on around SEND spending and rise in SEND spending, it's heartening to see there's a lot of items in this capital programme that are aiming to address the capacity for that, particularly 1.7 million to fulfil the requirement for a strategic response to increase efficiency to support priority 4 to address increasing demand for tailored, cost-effective SEND provision. I wondered if you might just sort of, give us a quick overview of the, what's being expanded and what the what that new capacity will enable us to do. Thank you.
I've been advised best probably to get the service to give the detail of what their plans for the 1.7 million to. I don't have that to hand. Sorry.
Fair enough. I look forward to it. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor McKinnon.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I'll start off by saying I take a bit of a different view to Councillor Armitage about the merits of external funding. I'd far rather that we obtain government grants and external funding, even if it means 100% of the project is funded that way, rather than get the council taxpayers of West Berkshire to pay for it. So, and I know the council council officers have traditionally been very good at identifying grant opportunities and getting that external funding. So more of it really is great, and it's good to see that's still coming in. Councillor Reid actually made a very good, important point about the solar farm. I was going to leave this to the end, but I'll start with it. You and I have had a few sort of sparring matches, executive and council, about the commercial property portfolio. And the justification which you've given for the divestment of that portfolio is that you wanted to de-risk the council. It's too risky to rely on that property. And that portfolio generated was £1 million a year clear profit. So I guess, is there not an inconsistency there when you say we want to de-risk the council in terms of its exposure to the commercial property market, but we are willing to take a risk in the solar farm?
So thank you for your question, Councillor McKinnon. I think one of the things which, as I say, we discussed earlier, primarily is regarding our ambition manifesto commitment to be net neutral by 2030, which contributes 40% towards that target. The actual solar farm is projected to generate 100K's worth of, I believe, net income to our P&L. But yes, you're quite right to say there is an element of risk regarding electricity prices. In some ways, the fact that, as I say, we have control of this, it is the right thing to do. We are building. We are having a strategy with regarding the climate crisis. And as I say, I don't believe it is contradictory. Let's say the commercial property portfolio was very much us being a commercial buy-to-let landlord. We're actually investing in an asset in West Berkshire, which will provide cheap electricity for the residents of West Berkshire. So I actually see this as being a wider context of moving towards being net zero as an authority.
Thanks. Thanks for that. You're right, the commercial property portfolio is being a buy-to-let landlord, and it generated £1 million profit, clear profit every year, which you can then take to use to put towards your manifesto commitments. So I always thought the commercial property portfolio got a bit of a bad rep in that people still say, well, that's money that could have been invested in West Berkshire. Well, it wasn't. It was borrowing that was done particularly for that purpose. If we hadn't established a portfolio, we wouldn't have borrowed that money. And it was generating £1 million a year to be spent in West Berkshire on the revenue budget. But I think we might come back to this at the end of the month, Councillor Cottingham. The final thing on the solar farm, what is the payback period on that? So it's going to be 18 million up front, presumably, but when do we actually break even in terms of revenues?
So this is a 30-year project costing 18.5 million. Anticipated payback is 10 years' time. Okay. So the payback is 10 years.
Thanks. Okay.
So
good.
In essence, you're looking at, as I say, net, what's that, 1.8 million?
A year, and then based on projections for the 20 years after that, then that's clear profit.
Clear profit.
Okay,
on
good.
Current electricity prices and everything else. So yeah.
I love it. Ask a direct question, get a direct answer. Thank you. Now, solar farm feeds into this. Now, when I was in your position, I loved the capital programme part of the budget. It was the good news bit of the budget, lots of good things, and it was great. It's kind of what you get into local politics to do. There is a bit of a large shadow over this one, which is a shame. We've applied for 16 million of emergency financial support. Now, when the government are assessing whether or not to give us that money, is there a risk they'll look at things that are not statutory, things that we would like to do, manifesto commitments are not, like the solar farm? Like, I'm looking at the big numbers in the capital programme. So like the 18 million in the solar farm, that's the big standout. But also things like 2.1 million for Four Houses Corner. These are council funded things that the council doesn't have to do, and say, look, you're spending this money this year on these things. That's what, over 20 million on those two things alone. And you're coming to us for a 16 million loan. What's going on there?
Thank you for your question, Councillor McKinnon. Just picking up on Four House Corners, my understanding is we have a statutory obligation to do this. So we... Yeah.
Clarify, I think it's a contractual, but not statutory.
Okay.
I'm looking at the chairman as she knows, but... And take that out of the equation. 18 million the solar farm, 16 million loan. What's the score?
Yes. So to explain to our residents, there is a distinction between obviously revenue accounting requirements and capital expenditure. And one of the things which I really want to get across to residents is cash is not the issue for West Berkshire. So we're not in any danger of not being able to pay our suppliers, no danger of not being able to pay our staff. So from a capital expenditure, we've talked earlier, the fact that we're within our borrowing requirements. It is the fact that the vagaries of local government accounting, the fact that we have to have a balanced budget for revenue purposes. So as Councillor McKinnon knows, in the corporate world, to get you through a time where you have periods of overspend, you either go to the market, a rights issue with shareholders, the banks, etc. In essence, what we're doing here is that we're going to the government for a short-term loan to in essence, to allow us to get through this period where we have more revenue expenditure than we have the actual revenue income. So to answer your question, we are not wasting money by building a better future for residents of West Berkshire, and the impact on the revenue account of borrowing is not that significant. So we're looking at around about £2 to £3 million worth of extra revenue expenditure for the entire level of external borrowing. So it's not huge.
Mr Holmes, I saw your hand.
Thank you very much through you, Chair. And I think also just to answer Councillor McKinnon's question, especially take the solar farm, for instance, if there is a net return there as well. So from a financial side of things, it makes financial sense to progress that, as well as delivering against our net zero objectives. And of course, MHLG will be looking through our papers, but as you say, there's some really positive things in the capital strategy, and lots of those are about investing in infrastructure. And that's really crucial for the district, because if we had a capital strategy which had none of that infrastructure investment, we'd be paying for it in 2, 3, 4, 5 years' time. Anyway, because we as an organisation have assets of kind of £2/3 of £1 billion plus, lots of those in core operational assets, which it's really important that we make sure that they are properly and adequately maintained and are there for our residents and businesses to use.
Thanks for that. Just I'll come back once, I think, on that. So at the risk of this descending into an accountant's free-for-all, is it fair to say that the emergency financial support from the government, that can go straight into reserves and it can support the revenue budget to a limited extent, whereas straightforward council borrowing cannot?
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. Yes.
Thanks.
Yes.
Fine.
And that is the vagary.
And it's an accounting distinction.
They are the rules, that the fact that we can borrow the money from exceptional financial support, put it into reserves, but we cannot take a capital receipt straight into reserves. But we can, in essence, borrow the money through exceptional financial support and pay it off using the capital receipt. So it is a convoluted way to achieve the same objective.
Lovely. And just final thing, Chairman, thank you. You mentioned the fact that, yes, there's council funding for the capital programme, yet we're going to be repaying the emergency financial support in a short space of time, and we have the headroom over borrowing. Just would you comment on the fact that actually when you looked at the MTFS and the fact we were going to break the council's own rule about 10% borrowing or 10% capital financing, again, is there an inconsistency there in what you're saying?
I think, as we discussed earlier, the fact that we're projecting that break of threshold in 3 or 4 years' time, based on what we know, it's very difficult for us to extrapolate what will be happening in the future. I think I'd be more concerned that we were breaking the rule next year and the year after. I think there's sufficient, as you know yourself, the fact that financial planning, is it an art, is it a science? It's probably a combination of both, and also putting your finger in the air with what you know now.
Thank you. Councillor Dick.
Thank you, Chairman. A general comment, the back row across the way here, the body language is a little bit defensive, and it shouldn't be, because you're doing the very best you can with the numbers you've got. What disturbs me, and I hear all the time, is complaints about government, whatever colour it is, and there's not enough and all that kind of stuff. And of course, take that as read. What I'm interested in hearing is, are we trying to do better with what we have? We have a limited income. There are some things we can do about it. You've had some advice there. You're doing some things to grow it, but can we just think across the piece how we can do more with less? Because that is the game, and not waste time complaining about what we're getting. That's a general remark. I'd like to follow up on Councillor Patton. That's twice, Councillor Patton. Your reputation could be in tatters if I do it 3 times. He's asked for an update on the 1.7 million, I think it was, and that'll come from the portfolio holder. So I'm going to ask the same question again about the capital, minor capital works was promised to all the schools that were in difficulty over the special needs of the clawback. Perhaps you can include in that whether all those items, I mean, I can write to this, I've already written to some of the schools and find out what they are. They know, she knows. Have they all been covered in the capital programme? Thank you.
Councillor Cottingham.
Yeah, I have a separate report, which I've also seen, which details out a number of schools, I think roughly a dozen schools, which have capital expenditure within that overall bucket. I need to do the reconciliation back between the two to confirm yes or no. Just moving on to the 11% rule, obviously that 11% rule includes the borrowing requirement for the DSD, the high needs. So it's something which is outside our control. So if it excluded that, we would be below the 10%. And picking up Councillor Dick's point over the fact that to do more with less, if you look at the record of the council of the amount of savings which it's had to deliver year on year, it is substantial. So we haven't been sitting on our proverbial backsides doing nothing. The fact there's been a lot of work being done by actual officers in this, trying to squeeze as much as possible from a financial efficiency perspective. So it has been very much a mantra of myself, is understanding what are the unit costs, making sure that we are driving that unit cost to the lowest possible level with the services which we're not impacting.
Chairman, quick come back on that. Councillor, you didn't quite get, maybe I didn't explain properly. I'm not criticising you at all. It's an exhortation.
Okay, thank you very much. Just a couple of points from me. I noticed there's a line for care director for social care case management system. I didn't think it was that long ago since we did upgrade care director. Perhaps, Mr. Coe, are you able to shed any light on that? It's quite a lot of money. It's about £959,000 for the next financial year.
Thank you, Chair. So the project to implement Care Director version 6 was unsuccessful.
Okay.
But we have some costs relating to that project. So we're now looking to move to a different system.
So what are we using at the moment?
So we've got Care Director version 5. And we're still using that, and there are of course costs linked to using version 5. But yeah.
Okay, thank you for clarifying, Mr. Coe. And the other point I was going to make was about nutrient neutrality. My understanding is that developers have to offset any nitrogen or phosphorus that they put into the watercourse, particularly in the Lambourne Valley, which is an area that's been designated for this. We've got quite a lot of money in that line. Is it not the case that we are looking to people where we can offset this? So it's not actually the fact that the council should be spending a lot of money on this, but it's actually that the developer should be spending money to offset their nutrient neutrality? Or is it the case that we're creating projects that developers can then essentially buy from us? What's the mechanics of that? Because it seems like we're putting a lot of money into that, whereas it shouldn't be the council, I wouldn't have thought, that are paying it.
Thank you, Chair, for your question. My understanding is that it's not defined yet. It's yet to be scoped what the rules are on this. So again, I think it's a new area which we've yet to fully bottom down.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, if we're creating our own projects that people can then buy from us and use those to offset, then it might potentially be a good deal. But obviously, it has to be a good deal.
Yeah, there could be an opportunity for us to sell our own carbon credits on the open market. Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Yes.
Okay, great. Any other questions, members? Nope. Okay, thank you very much for that. Moving on to the revenue budget. Over to you, Councillor Cottingham.
Thank you, Chair. I'll just take a glass of water.
Yeah. You ought to have something stronger for this, like the Chancellor of the Exchequer.
The main meat of the night's agenda. Right. Right. So revenue budget for 25-26. Been a lot of discussion prior to this meeting. So we've obviously announced to the media what the financial pressure which we face as an organisation. We are not unique in having to seek exceptional financial support. We were well aware of 19 councils within England who have done so, with potentially another 10 or so who we're aware of. Whether that number is the full number. So it is a bit of a perfect storm which we face, as we talked about earlier. Increase in demand for our statutory services, increase in the actual unit cost of delivery, increase in the complexity of service delivery. And also the fact that we've been living in a period of high inflation as well. So a cost of living crisis is not just for the man in the street, it's also any business which has a number of suppliers, and also the fact that we do a lot of outsourcing as well as an organisation. So we are not unique. Also not helped, as I say, with the national insurance increase. We don't get full funding to compensate us as West Berkshire Council for our own employees. We get a certain element funded back. We've talked earlier about our dependency on adult social care providers, that they don't get any refunds on national insurance either. So, as I say, we live in a world where there is an increasing demand but decreasing ability to actually fund this. So it doesn't mean it's impossible, it just means it's been a bit of a challenge to actually bridge the gap. So initially we were identified £11.2 million worth of savings to find. We actually identified 6 million, and within that there is 1.2 million which went out to consultation. No doubt the members of Scrutiny panel will have a number of questions about the consultation process and individual items on this, so I probably leave that to, unless we want to go through them line by line. We also, the fact that part of that 11.2 million, there's a further 2 million being identified with regarding vacant posts, which leaves this gap of 3 million, which we're looking to use exceptional financial support to cover. Anticipating the question, if we don't get exceptional financial support from the government, we will then have to move into an even more challenging period whereby the officers of West Berkshire Council will pull together a paper to the executive to make some really tough decisions of how we then plug the gap. That gap will, in reality, won't be 3 million, it'll be 5 million through the fact that the very nature of being able to implement those savings, because they won't happen on day one, 1st of April, they will take time to actually implement. So to allow us realistically to bridge that gap, it'll be more like 5 million, which we'll have to find, which is also discussed in Shannon's disclosure in F2 2.3 section 25, where she talks about Councillor Reid's favourite word, risk, of us being able to achieve. So that's a very much her professional opinion, our ability to be able to deliver the savings and the financial resilience which we have as a council. So, as I say, we've talked many times previously about the fact that we may need to go into exceptional financial support. Unfortunately, that time has now arisen where the letter has been written. As I said earlier, this doesn't impact our ability as being a going concern to be able to pay our suppliers, pay our staff. There isn't a run on West Berkshire Council. This is purely an accounting issue regarding the fact that we need, as I say, our reserves to be bolstered by getting this loan into our reserves. So therefore, we have enough financial resilience to cope with, as we discussed earlier, the fact that we may have children coming to us into our care, which cost us £5,000-10,000 a week, which if you have half a dozen of those children, your reserves are very much put under stress. So yeah, it is trying to give us the financial resilience to be able to cope with issues which are out of our control.
Thank you, Councillor Cotting. Questions from members? Wow, don't all rush at once.
Pretty. Thanks, Chairman, and thank you, Councillor Cottingham. It's just at this very moment that my computer has decided to pack in. You mentioned earlier on, Councillor Cottingham, that this is the main event of this evening. Be careful with your speech on the 27th, because the revenue budget's included in the MTFS, and it's really easy to ask all your questions on the revenue budget while you're doing that, which is most of what I've done tonight. But I do have a few more if I can just find them. And here we are. The Leader of the Council in the past, again, when I was sitting where you are, has been a very vocal proponent of something called zero-based budgeting. It was an annual request of his that the council should budget for its revenue budget in that way, rather than the traditional, well, here's the budget last year, let's model some growth on that, let's put some inflation on that, and so on, which we have. But there's pros and cons of that. But has there been any consideration this year of taking a ZBB approach?
Thank you for your question, Councillor McKinnon. We looked at zero-based budgeting from a capital expenditure perspective, and for the revenue budget, we went to activity-based budgeting. So we were doing the comparison of what the unit costs are to deliver.
Okay, but it's probably fair to say that if we're not doing a full ZBB approach this year, which is, all right, you try and look for the upsides in the situation that you face, then it's probably never going to happen.
I would never say never, never. I think it's, as I say, one of the challenges which we have as an organisation, the complexity of need of 500 services, of ensuring that we have fit for purpose financial systems and the actual integration. And it is one of the more longer term ambitions that we have, an IT infrastructure which allows us to have this type of management reporting. And I think, as the Chair alluded to earlier, the advantage of us moving into AI, we talk about the third, fourth generation of IT. I think there's lots of things which we can be doing in the future which will allow us to have more real-time statistical financial analysis to be able to do the benchmarking. I think at the moment we're probably on a journey which will lead us to this way in which we will have a more robust way of doing zero-based budgeting, activity-based budgeting. We're at the stage now where we're still not quite using the quill, but we still have, as I say, systems which need to be integrated. And that's one of the challenges which we face in local government, is the fact that we don't necessarily have all of the capital expenditure which we would like to have to do the back office stuff.
Thanks.
So it's all about choice.
Thank you very much. One final one from me. Thanks, Chairman. On the consultation responses and the decisions what to do. So I'm looking at page 14 of the report in our packs. Oh, and it's page 14 of the appendix. I beg your pardon. Yeah, page 14 of Appendix A. That's what I'm speaking tonight. But basically, it says that the consultation proposal, which was to explore options to deliver adult social care resource centre services through an alternative provider or delivery method, the decision is to progress that as per the proposal. Are you in a position to give us details about what that will look like right now?
The short and most accurate answer is no, not really. So we've had preliminary conversations with external providers, and they indicated that they'd be interested in expanding what they deliver. But of course, we weren't in a position to go into a tremendous amount of detail until the decision-making process was a bit further advanced. So where we are right now is we've spoken with staff, we've spoken with service users and their families, we've made them aware of the intent, but we've also made it clear, and frustrating as this is for a lot of people involved, we've also made it clear that there's quite a lot of known unknowns. Until we get to a position where we are really clear on what external providers want to deliver, where they want to deliver, whether they want to expand their existing services or come in consortia or something similar, we can't give concrete clear sense of what is the final product going to look like. So frustrating, but that's the reality.
Thanks for that, Paul. And I'll just comment on that. I know that you mentioned there that service users have already been contacted about this. And I know that you've got a balancing act because you want to be straight with people as early as possible. But at the same time, if you're not in a position to tell them what their provision is going to look like, then particularly for the cohort of users that we're doing with, that could actually cause a lot of panic, and then they end up really in a worse position than they were before. So I guess, you know, my question is, are you happy that contacting residents and telling them that their current provision is going to end, but without giving them an idea about what the replacement's going to look like, could actually be counterproductive?
Really, really fair. And I think we've been on the other side of this where papers have gone into the public domain with those people most affected not being cited on them. So this is essentially us saying, look, you will see in the public domain budget papers relating to this plan. We need to make you aware of the fact, therefore, that we will progress the work. Now, yes, it is regrettable that we don't have a clear, absolutely firm destination or indeed timeline, but we have been open with people, those affected most closely, ahead of the final decision.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. Any other questions? Councillor Bowick.
Thank you, Chairman. Councillor Cottingham, are there any savings initiatives, substantial savings initiatives, which probably of the sort that might require consultation that do not appear in these papers?
No, monitoring officer to the left has confirmed there isn't. So we went through with a fine-tooth comb all the savings which have been identified, whether or not they required public consultation, and we're very clear to make sure that we captured everything.
I'm not trying to trip you up here, but I know that that at least 2 of our family hubs have received letters in December saying that that there would be no funding for the family hub services post March of this year. That there is a review being undertaken of the way in which those services are going to be delivered, if at all, and the way that when you read I've seen the letter, it is quite clear to the recipients that there are jobs at stake.
Sorry, just to confirm, my understanding is that is not part of the revenue budget provision. So there is external funding, and I believe the family hubs have been aware of this issue for some time, and that the council has been communicating with them regarding the need to make alternative provision if that kind of central funding was to cease. So I think it's outside the revenue budget proposal. So in terms of our need to consult in order to set the revenue budget regarding that, the answer is no. We are not changing the funding for those family hubs. So that's my understanding. And I will ensure that we've got a very detailed answer to give going forward, but it's not part of these proposals is my very firm understanding.
So where does that change in funding appear in the budget? Because what I'm concerned about here is, I mean, we had a discussion earlier on about the importance of early years services and support, and here we are saying to at least half of our family hubs, maybe all of them, I don't know, those early years children and families support is no longer going to be there.
I'll take Mr. Holmes, but Martha, I think, might have something to say on this as well. I'll just go to Mr. Holmes first, and is it on this particular point?
It's particularly on this, and thank you for Councillor Burke for raising this, and I share your concerns. I had a similar letter from the head of Victoria Park, and I've had exchanged quite a few emails with Councillor Codling about this matter, and it's more or less what we've just been told. There was concern about funding, which is coming from central government, which so the discussions were around that, but that's been resolved. But there is a change. So the funding is there, but there was concern prior to that, and the council was being honest with the heads about what was going on. I think it's Victoria Park and also Hungerford that were involved. But there is going to be, in order to improve the service, there's going to be a sort of reorganisation of the service. So Victoria Park and possibly Hungerford will provide a 0 to 19 service rather than just in early years. So there is ongoing conversations, and the heads are being, so there have been more letters going backwards and forwards, emails, since you probably had the initial one, but it is an ongoing conversation in order to improve the service. And I have asked, you know, I don't want the service for the early years to be compromised by expanding it, and I've been reassured that that's not the case, that it's to make the service better for the family and more joined up. But there's obviously concerns when things are changing, but it's an ongoing discussion and they're being kept in the loop.
Mr. Holmes, did you want to say something on this? I saw your hand. Was your point been made?
Thank you, through you, Chair. So yes, the funding previously was in specific ring-fenced grants from central government. Some of those have been rolled into the overall funding pot, and some of the information around that's been received in the last couple of weeks. So we have had confirmation around those future funding streams, and as Councillor Vickers noted, that for the year ahead, the funding will remain for those family hubs.
Thank you. Councillor Bowick.
Thank you, and thank you, Councillor Vickers. It's great to hear from ward member what's going on. I can assure you that at least the Hungerford head teacher is at her wit's end. People are very concerned about the future of those services is assured. It doesn't sound to me, hearing in this discussion this evening, that I have that assurance.
Can I suggest that we ask the most relevant officer as an action point from this meeting to offer reassurance and further explanation to the
reassurance? Assurance.
Assurance, yeah. Okay, if we can make that note. Sorry, Mr. Holmes.
Yeah, I mean, for the year ahead, I can provide that assurance. So the director has written out very recently on that funding is available for the year ahead.
Okay. Yep.
I think Councillor Bjork, you know, in raising this, has highlighted, and I was concerned that sort of members as well as, you know, weren't being properly sort of kept abreast of this. So certainly ward members and possibly all members, even when something's being discussed in general and you've got your head down and you're trying to sort something out, it's difficult to think about the communication side probably. But in order to make sure people don't, you know, staff don't worry, members are fully informed, so when they get questions, they can answer them correctly. It's really important to keep the communication going. So that's been my concern actually over this, that, you know, you had to go away and ask questions rather than feeling you knew what was going on. So I know it's difficult when things are happening and you're trying to sort of wait for answers and central government's involved, but it's just trying to get the information out, particularly to ward members. And Victoria Park's not my ward, it's not my district council ward, it's my town council ward. So the head contacted me just because she knew me and just wanted sort of, you know, some response. So I think it's important, particularly to make sure ward members are involved. Thank you.
I think that's an important point about communication with councillors. I don't know what other people's views are, but I'm very conscious that I often find out about things, and I think members ought to have been told, you know, there should have been like a Q&A or lines to take provided or whatever to give you some information so that when people do contact you, you've got something. I realise that you could end up with something, you know, some massive document about everything that's going on. But I think some thought from the communications team about internal comms, actually communicating with the members, would be really welcome. Yeah, Councillor Bowick.
Only last week I heard from Victoria Park and Hungerford that they're concerned. So those concerns have not yet been addressed unless something's happened.
But they have. Victoria Park have.
Okay, I think if we take this offline as an action and like you say, if we ask for assurance that this is being dealt with, and any questions or concerns that people have got are addressed, and if we can do that as a matter of urgency,
Thank you.
I think that would be helpful to all concerned. Okay, thank you, members. Any other questions? Councillor Reid.
Yeah, again, it's a risk one. Sorry, guys. Inflation is obviously going to be a big concern. It's not been, the days between 2011 to 2018 when inflation was, kind of moved along a bit, and then we've had it yo-yo quite a lot, along with the interest rates as well. Have we got a risk that we've got contracts, large material contracts coming up for renewal where we might be surprised by market shifts, where, they're all looking to increase prices at the moment. Certainly when I look at my car insurance, it only goes north, it never goes south at the moment.
Well, yes, thank you for your question, Councillor Reid. Like any business, we're not immune, as I said earlier, to contract supplier inflation. The fact that there is a projection that inflation will be potentially 2.5%, 3%. I even heard the word stagflation mentioned as a risk last week. So, for those, I do remember stagflation from my O-level GCSE economics from 1980. So I'm probably giving my age away. How long ago I did economics. So basically, stagflation is a period whereby you've got no economic growth, but prices still go up. And yeah, there is a risk within our what's the word? The actual economics of UK PLC. I think quite a few of our contracts, especially as I say, I think the Viola one is it CPI? RPIX. So there is a risk that will increase if inflation goes up. I know Mr. Coe is in frequent discussions with our adult social care providers to make sure we're getting best value regarding increases in procurement. But yes, you're quite right to identify there is a risk to these numbers from inflationary supplier negotiation. It's difficult for us to counter that. We talked earlier about the fact the cost of living, we're not immune to it. And obviously, we talked about national insurance increases, which have been levied to the commercial sector, which no doubt will probably trickle their way down to us as being providers, as being recipients of those contracts.
Okay. There's a line in here about the black bin collections, and there's a costing for it. Are there any plans to mitigate that and have if people are in desperate need of more often bin collections, more frequent bin collections, or bigger bins? I say, for example, if it's a young family and they've got a lot of nappies and that kind of thing, has the costings of that, does that take into account any plans you've got for having different approaches to different people?
Thank you for your question, Chair. I'm not aware of that. So.
Okay. Any other questions, members? No? Okay. Thank you very much indeed for that. Right, moving on, financial year 2024-25, Q3 capital financing performance report.
This report will be discussed at executive in 2 days' time, I think. I suppose the highlight of this is that we had a budget capital expenditure of 58.5 million. The plan to delivery for this current financial year is 49.3 million. down 9.2 million. As ever, we have a rollover of projects. That is, we're also always at the mercy of having sufficient resources to be able to deliver our ambition. It is something which obviously we're looking at to improve our effectiveness of delivering capital expenditure program, not least from a project management perspective of saying, right, what are best practice, what are the tools which we can have in place to be able to deliver.
Thank you, Councillor Cottingham. Any questions from members? Councillor McKinnon.
Yeah, it's not so much a question, more of a statement. This is very, very similar to the Q2 report, and the themes are similar, and they were asked and answered then. And there's actually quite a bit of overlap in this report to the capital programme in the budget as well, with some of the things that it talks about. So in a sense, we've covered most of this already. So I don't have any individual questions, just a couple of observations, if you don't mind, Chairman. I was delighted that Theo Railway Station's improvements finally opened. Maybe I should have declared an interest, because I go to Theo Station when I scoot into London, and it's very nice. It looks great. Disappointed to see at the start of this week that the lifts were broken about 2 weeks after it had opened. So, you know, all that capital financing didn't stop the lifts breaking. And yeah, perhaps we could have some element of the capital budget to fix that clock, which is wrong, and it's putting me off all night. But no further questions, Your Honour.
Thank you, Councillor McKinnon. Any other questions? Sorry,
Councillor McKinnon, I hope you reported the lift broken.
It's actually a friend of mine that told me about it, so I hope he did as well.
Any other questions, members? No. Okay, thank you very much. Moving on. Item 11, 2024-25 Revenue Financial Performance Report for Q3.
Thank you, Chair. So again, this report will be presented exec on Thursday. The main headline being the fact that compared to Q2, we're 400k up on the outturn regarding overspend. In 4.1, we have a projected overspend for the year of 11.5 million. My understanding is majority of that is what we covered off earlier: adult social care, children family services, and home to school transport has been the major driver for this increased volume, increased cost.
Thank you. Any questions from members? Councillor McKinnon.
Yeah, thanks. A little bit more to say on this one. I'm not intending to have a go at you about this one. We'll do that on Thursday. But it's more of getting a handle on that overspend there. So 11.5 million against a net revenue budget of what, 164. That's a big overspend. This one's your budget, and I know the answer to it, and you know it's a valid answer. But you know, are we getting to grips with why that original model was so wrong, and have we baked in those improvements for subsequent years?
It's a very valid question, which I was mulling over as I drove in earlier this evening. Is that there needs to be, as I say, an understanding of any variance. Is it volume? Is it price? So yeah, I will be driving down further into understanding what has been the primary cause of that drive, because you can be 11 million overspend. However, you can on a price element be 20 million over, and the volume 9 million under. So it's sort of high, you know, so it can camouflage what have been the primary drivers. And if it is the fact that the model understated volume, why? If it understated the unit cost, again, why? Has there been a change in the mix and the complexity of children or the complexity of adults which we're having to provide? So yes, a very, very valid point of understanding what have been the drivers for that increase. And yes, I will take an action on myself. Thank you very much, Councillor McKinnon, to get a more formal understanding of what the causes of that overspend have been.
You're a CMA accountant, right? So you know the feedback and the feed forward loop. So variances are one thing.
Sorry to interrupt, Councillor McKinnon. I think Mr. Holmes had his hand up as well on that point.
Oh,
sorry.
I was in the middle of a good bit, but that's okay. Go on.
He was in the middle of a good accounting bit there.
Yeah,
I suppose actually just in response through you, Chair, to Councillor McKinnon's question, I think if you look at some of the items going to the revenue budget and some of that, requirement for the request for exceptional financial support, you do see some of those pressures reflected back. So, home to school transport, cost pressure, £1.3 million that we're seeing in the current year, that is adjusted for in the next year. You see over £8 million going in for the social care model. Again, a significant overspend there going into next year's budget. Housing pressures. Now, we are not fully funding all of those pressures for next year because we have, to an earlier question raised by councillors, we've already engaged in a sort of project with Walnut Close opening in the coming days, where we are using sort of transformation resources to reduce housing pressures into the future. So we are not fully funding those pressures because we think actually we've already put mitigations in place which will have an ongoing benefit there. But there is a really strong correlation between a lot of the pressures we see here that we adjust for in the subsequent years, which is really important to try and get rid of that residual overspend pushing into the next financial year.
Thank you. Back to you, Councillor McKinnon.
No, it was a good answer, but the moment's gone, so that's it from me.
You'll have another opportunity, exec and full council as well. So, any other questions? Okay, thank you very much. Right, that brings us to the end of our items about finance this evening. So I'd just like to thank Councillor Cottingham and officers who've joined us this evening to help us answer our questions. So you are free to leave now.
Thank you, Chair.
And perhaps get something stronger than water to...
This is just a dress rehearsal for Thursday, I think, at the end of the month.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. Much appreciated. Right, okay, moving on. The next item on the agenda is the Task and Finish Group update. So the Sports Hub Task and Finish Group has concluded its deliberations, and I just want to thank councillors Dick, Cottam, Reid and Marsh for their participation in that, and also to thank the witnesses and the officers. The paper is drafted and it will be considered by Corporate Board next week. And then it will go to scrutiny, or come to scrutiny, I should say, on the 13th of March. So our next meeting. Yeah, and thank you, well, officers, and thank you, of course, to Mr. Oliver, who clerked. Thank you, Councillor Dick. So the papers will be public the week before the scrutiny meeting. So around about the 6th, 7th of March, and until that point they remain part 2. So I won't be saying anything else about the recommendations or the findings of the paper, but I do hope that it will go to executive, assuming the Scrutiny Commission approve it, in good time for the findings and the recommendations to inform the playing pitch strategy, which is due to be published around June, July time. So we've done that piece of work quite quickly. Lots of findings, lots of recommendations, and hopefully they will be useful for the council. I don't know if Councillor Dick or Councillor Reid want to say anything about that. Obviously, we can't go into details, but no.
No, except the chairman's done a splendid job.
Thank you.
It's a good report with some important issues raised.
Thank you very much. Okay, great, thank you. Appointment of Task and Finish Group. So as members know, we have plans to have a project management Task and Finish Group to look in particular at Care Director and iTrent, which is an HR project. We had talked, I think, at the previous meeting about having a third project that we'd look at, but we think, bearing in mind we've looked at the Sports Hub, I think the findings and the recommendations from that could probably be considered as the third project rather than deliberately looking around for other things to look at. Councillor Reid is going to be chairing that, and I'm sure he'll do a fantastic job. But we do need to find other members for that Task and Finish Group. It will be able to begin its deliberations as soon as Councillor Reid and Mr. Oliver are ready. But if I could urge you, please, to go away to your groups and find, I mean, if anyone wants to volunteer this evening, they're very welcome. But we do need volunteers for that as soon as possible. We need 5 people. It doesn't need to be politically balanced. So we had 1 Conservative, 2 Lib Dem and 2 Greens on the Sports Hub. So Councillor Pattenden. Who'd like to volunteer? Fantastic. Okay. Did I see your hand? Wonderful. Thank you, Councillor. Right, so we just need one other person then. So I think it'd probably be quite good to have someone from the minority group as well. So I'm happy to go away and talk to our leader, David Marsh, see if anyone's up for that. It might be nice for Adrian or Clive to have a go on a task and finish group. I won't be participating. I've done 4 now. I think that's quite enough. So thank you, members, for that, and good luck with that, Councillor Reid. Good. Right. Health Scrutiny Committee update. We're privileged to have Councillor Vickers with us. In the past, I've done a read out from a written update about this. So over to you to give us an update about your work.
Thank you very much, Chair. The Health Scrutiny Committee last met on the 12th of December, and the items we looked at were the proposed relocation of Eastfield House surgery, which is literally bursting at the seams. Our discussions were mainly around the adequacy of the consultation process with patients and the public. Since the meeting, the Eastfield House has received planning permission, and they will now be submitting their outline business case. They will remain under review by the Health Scrutiny Committee, and we'll be possibly bringing them back to see how things are progressing. The other items we discussed were access to GP services and all-age continuing care. And this will be returning in 6 months so we can monitor the progress. Currently, we have a task group underway which is reviewing children's mental health and emotional well-being in West Berkshire, and Councillor Dick is one of the members on that. In each session, we're bringing together key stakeholders to review the current needs, services and provisions, and partners from health, education, the council, and the voluntary sector are also contributing their experiences and roles in children's mental health locally. It's a very, we have a lot of witnesses joining us, and we've only had 1 session, but that was extremely enlightening, I think. And this next one, we'll be looking in more detail at what's going on in our schools. And the witnesses have been very valuable, and we're very, we thank them for taking part in this. A report will be completed following the completion of the sessions, and we have 3 sessions in all, possibly a fourth, but primarily 3. And after that, there will be a report, and it will go to a future Health Scrutiny Committee. The next Health Scrutiny Committee will be on the 11th of March, and we'll be looking at the South Central Ambulance Service and oral health in dentistry. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Vickers, for that update. Any questions for Councillor Vickers? Councillor Matharaj.
I know this has been in the public, but I just wanted to, for the public to know in the scrutiny. Martha, is there any discussion on the Royal Berks Hospital discussion, or it's just delays or
This has been brought to Health and Wellbeing Board, I think. So okay. It's
not this.
Not Health Scrutiny, but it is being obviously looked at.
Okay, great. Any other questions? No. Okay. And as members are aware from previous discussions at Scrutiny, there is a plan for adult social care to be part of the Health Scrutiny Committee's work. And there is due to be a paper about that annual council, is my understanding. So we should find out more there. Obviously, there are synergies between what your committee's doing, Councillor Vickers, and the adult social care work. So hopefully that will work really well. Good. Thank you very much. Right, moving on, item 15, Executive Forward Plan. So as is usual at these meetings, we have the Executive Forward Plan in front of us. Do members have any questions on this? I mentioned earlier that I think it's unfortunate that the Section 19 report has not yet been published. My understanding is it's due to go to executive soon. That was the report into the flooding last year. And as I mentioned, we're already under flood alert again and have been for a number of weeks now. And it would have been good for those findings to be in the public domain and to help inform our policies and our funding decisions and so on. And I think one of the lessons the council needs to learn in future is to get those reports generated and published as soon as possible. If we are going to have flooding events every year, then we need to get the lessons learned from that before the next set of flooding happens. I know Councillor Gawley's been working hard on that with Mr Winstanley, but we did discuss the report at our special meeting back in October, and we're now 4 or 5 months further down the line and that still hasn't been published. Councillor Amatharaj.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to point out one item in here in page 49. I think if people look at it, it's a ward specific one, not a district one. It's a Love Lane, Bastion Street, Newbury bus gate proposal. So it's the bus gate. The context is this is part of the planning condition, and we are all supportive of it because this restricts access to only the blue light services. But I know Councillor Gurley and the officers are working very hard, but we are working with the parish council as well. So the context I'm trying to bring here is this has to go ahead because this was part of the planning condition and it will protect the Love Lane residents from the extra traffic which will come from the North Newbury development. So just although it's a regular procedure to go through, but we are all in support of this one to go ahead. So just wanting to highlight that one.
Thank you very much. I have been asked by Anne-Marie Dodds if we can push back the items about children's care and education for the next meeting on the 13th of March. And I have said that I am happy for that to be the case. We've got an unexpected Ofsted, unannounced Ofsted inspection that's going on at the moment. I don't think it's concluded yet. And there are 2 other inspections due to come shortly that we are aware of and that are planned. So I was happy to allow Anne-Marie Dodds to push that back because her team are under pressure at the moment to deal with those 3 inspections. So I hope that's okay. I made that decision earlier today when she contacted me. Councillor Reid.
I think absolutely agree with that, and it will also be good to discuss those Ofsted reports that will be coming out as well at the same time.
Yeah, good point. Thank you. So that means we will have a gap on the agenda. So not wanting to just create extra work for us, but I think it might be good if we were to look at the waste management strategy, because that's due at exec on the 3rd of April. So we could look at this on the 13th of March. Councillor McKinnon.
You took the words right out of my mouth, Chairman. Okay. I think, what are the most visible council services that residents have? The bins is just right up there, isn't it? Yeah. So I'm surprised it wasn't on there already. Yeah. Definitely support that.
Was it on our work strategy further down? I can't remember. We'll have a look at the work programme in a minute. But yeah, no, absolutely. Especially bearing in mind that the council have said in the revenue budget that they're planning to move to the 3 weekly black bin cycle. There's also something about corporate accommodation coming up. I mean, this presumably is to do with the future of the council building. I don't know whether that's anything we would want to look at. Maybe it's a little bit too detailed and nuanced, but would that be something that councillors would be interested in finding out more about? That's down on exec on the 3rd of April as well. There's no more detail here. It just says corporate accommodation review. There's nothing in the purpose column. No.
I just think, is it of district-wide importance? Probably not.
Fair enough. Thank you for that, members. And then just to say our COVID task and finish report, which Councillor Dick chaired, is going to executive this Thursday. So do tune in on YouTube Live and see what the executive are planning to accept from that report. And thank you very much again to Councillor Dick for chairing that. Good. Anything else on the exec? No? Great. Okay, so moving on to our own work programme. Okay. I'm just scrolling down the document. So as I mentioned, we're going to push back the children's services items. We'll do waste at the next meeting. So Mr. Gordon, if you could ask, sorry, Mr. Olive. I'll get people's names right eventually. Yes, if we could ask the relevant officers if they're able to bring that report to us in March, that would be great. And then we'll have to have the children's services at the July meeting, I think. So I'm just scrolling down this great big document. So we will also be having a paper about the devolution proposals.
Sorry, 1 second, Chairman.
Sorry.
The first couple of items were about attainment. Well, the first item's about attainment of children free school meals. Would that be part of the education contribution? In which case, we're talking about children, not just primary children, but secondary children. So the date is going to be a year out of date. But on the other hand, there's always a good reason for delaying, which I don't like. What do you think?
That's something we can go back and clarify with Anne-Marie Dodds about the inclusion of secondary as well as primary.
Yeah,
and
it won't
about
change.
the
Or we could do it in
data.
2 bits if you wanted, because they are very different.
Sure. So primary and secondary separate.
The primary data will be available in the summer, but
Okay.
yeah.
So there's a time lag for the secondary. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, there is. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
She'll know. I trust.
Thank you. I'll have a word with her about that. So we'll have a paper on devolution at the next Scrutiny Commission meeting. As I mentioned earlier, the government have got plans to reorganise local government, so devolve certain powers to mayors who are going to be overseeing strategic authorities, and then to rationalise, if that's the right word, unitary authorities, so that we have bigger unitary authorities that represent at least 500,000 people. Councillor Amathoraj.
Thank you, Chairman. But is it too early to discuss in the March, because it's just in the public domain and it is just we may not have more information.
There is a paper going to executive this coming Thursday, so there are lots of discussions going on, and obviously Councillor Brooks is going to bring that paper on Thursday to give us a bit more information about what's happening. So that will be an ongoing process. This is going to go on, I think, for a number of years. Councillor Reid.
Yeah, I've raised this at the various parish councils in my ward, and I thought I'd be boring them stiff, but actually there was a lot of engaging conversation going on around there. That obviously, I think you need confirmation that parish boundaries aren't going to change, but there's a lot of concern that they're going to be further away from whatever ward members will be in the future under devolution. What's that mean to parish councils, and services and engagement with their own people? Will they have to be picking up that communication? So I think there is, certainly at parish council level, there's a lot of interest now on what's going on.
Sorry, Chairman, just to clarify Councillor Reid's point, I think there is a clarification or confirmation that parish and towns boundaries are there.
Correct.
Structure won't be affected.
Yeah, in the devolution, the confirmation that they're not changing, but obviously, the powers above them that are going to be changing, it's inevitable. It's going to have impacts on how they're going to communicate with the authorities that are above them.
Councillor Dick.
Chairman, I'm a little bit concerned about this. It is important. It will be very important for West Berkshire. Obviously, we overlap with Hampshire and Oxfordshire, so they're in at least one of them in the first wave. For us, it'll be a arranged marriage, whether we choose it or not, at some point with another. People are looking to People's Republic of Reading and a bit nervous about that, but we'll see. I just worry that it'd be a lot of navel gazing and not much meat. So it could be, and I worry that we look at a lot of things, but not in enough depth sometimes, because the things that really matter to our residents are the little things, aren't they? So I just wonder if you'd like, perhaps if others agree, you can have a look at this paper, and if it's a lot of navel gazing, then just leave it until there's something more important to say.
I think this is a good example, though, of where we can have an input quite early on in the process, because often things come to us, like a lot of the budget decisions have been made, for example. Whereas with this, I think we can have an input, because as you say, there'll be arranged marriages. We don't know whether we're going to be looking east towards Reading and Wokingham, or maybe north towards Vale and South Oxfordshire. So I think Scrutiny being able to have an input into those discussions would be quite good.
If we're at that stage.
Yeah.
I'm not even sure we'll be at that stage yet.
Sure. No, well, exactly. Like you say, I can can have a look at the paper, and if there's not very much. But I do think the relationship with the parishes and the towns is very important, because I've been to a number of LGA meetings, and the districts are very concerned that they're going to disappear, and there's going to be a bit of a democratic deficit. People are going to be further removed from their representatives, and there is a question around parishes and town councils. If this is about devolution, what can be devolved to them along with budget responsibilities, so that the local people feel that they're still close to the people that are making decisions?
Equally, the more mature of us were here when that happened here, and there were no fatalities.
Sure. I think it's good for us to try and get ahead of the game with this, though, rather than wait and find that we've got something imposed upon us. And a lot of this is going to be about planning. There's no point in it happening and then saying, oh, what are the parish and town councils going to do now, you know? Councillor Bowick.
Thanks, Sharon. Yeah, I think you make a good point. It's a good idea for us to understand and provide input. I don't think that it's for scrutiny to communicate changes to parish councils. So you know, and they're always going to be concerned, aren't they? Further away you get from the kind of decision-making process, the more uncertainty there is. But so by all means, us as members of scrutiny communicate with your parish council. But then there's you know there's 63 of them, you know. So
yeah, sorry, I probably didn't make myself clear, Councillor Burke. Yeah, so it's not.
If I may.
Yeah.
But it perhaps something that we can point out is that communication is really important.
Yeah, no, thank you for that. It wasn't so much the communication I was thinking about. It was about making recommendations about how parishes and towns could think about what powers they might want to take on, what services, what funds. So, for example, we already know that the parishes are taking on a lot of waste bins because they weren't very happy with the Continental contract. So thinking about that, you know, this devolution is going to be imposed upon us. What can town and parish councils be doing in the meantime? I went to a local government or association meeting where I wasn't particularly impressed with NOUC, the National Association of Local Councils. I don't think they've given enough thought to this. So maybe we can think about what we can do in our area. And I think probably the two town councils or three town councils probably ought to be involved in a discussion around that again. So yeah, it's not about communication. It's about how do we get involved in this and make sure we don't have something imposed upon us. This is an opportunity for us to put our views forward about what should be happening. And I know that out there, everyone's scurrying around having conversations already with Reading, Wokingham, Vale of Whitehouse, South Oxfordshire. So we don't want to find that we end up with a paper saying this thing is happening, take it or leave it. And we ask questions, but it's too late to influence it. So I think if we can be involved in that influencing process, but I will take on board what you said. Yeah, I'll take on board what you say. If there's no meat on the bone and we think we should wait a while longer until there's more, that's fine. Thank you very much. Yeah. Okay. Sorry, beg your pardon. Yeah.
Chairman, I was going to suggest two items. Should I suggest at the end or just because I thought like one item can be fit in the March if you are discussing children about I think you know about this when I highlighted this, the safer streets, safer schools agenda. So what has happened is in our particular ward, I and Martha are working with the head teachers. We have 4 primary and 1 secondary. So we are in a ward where a lot of primary schools are there. So the main issue is the safer schools and the safe traffic issues, the safety of the schools, particularly children getting caught in the traffic. So what has happened is I raised this one in the TAG group, the travel advisory, but what I learned from that one is it's a closed one for obvious reasons. It's a lot of part to discuss. So it's only invite basis. So what is happening is there is a gap in our district's forum where there is no place for the heads teachers who are crying for help or PTFA people to go to some forums and seek help. I know they can engage with officers. They are doing it. I know officers it's not critical. I'm not criticizing they're helping out, but there is no forum for heads to publicly come out. And as a scrutiny commission, I thought it would be good to understand what is being done to effectively ensure there is safer schools and safer streets. And it's a project we are working with the heads, but I see lack of funding, lack of officers, lack of communication. All those aspects are putting in one problem to the front, that is our children are not safe in primary schools. And that I thought like we could pick up in one of the meetings. And the other one I wanted to highlight was the housing one, which we put in the previous years, but it's not figured here. The reason I'm seeing that is important was the suppliers, the housing, social housing suppliers like Sovereign. I think we should bring them in for scrutiny. One such example I can give you to hear as well as for the public to know is recently I know an application in my ward where you know the developments in the reservoir near the Speen. What they've said was they have an affordable housing condition, but they're now changing it, request for changing it to move it to new homes, home bonus discount. The reason attributed for that one was Sovereign is not able to take those houses into their fold and provide housing. So what happens is it takes out entirely the control of West Berkshire as a district to provide social care or affordable housing even, and it takes anything out of our control and putting into the hands of the developers working with. So what I'm trying to say here is, on the one hand, we are saying social housing or affordable housing is less. We are looking for all those avenues. On the other hand, I'm checking with officers and it's still, but there is an application saying exactly this one to say Sovereign are not able to take those housings units. So just wanting to give that example as a point to inquire Sovereign how they are dealing with all this demand on one hand and how they are dealing with supply coming to them from the new developments we've seen, at least from planning committee members. We've seen so many housing are available and affordable, but they are not matching up. So there is a gap in there where we can bring in Sovereign and the likes of those people to scrutinize them. So those were the two I wanted to bring into here and see if we can put them in agenda accommodator. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Amatharaj. I have had communication with Councillor Gawley, who chairs Transport Advisory Group, and I understand the discussions are going on around safer streets. Your point about getting external stakeholders in to have a discussion, I don't think there's any reason why they couldn't be invited into an advisory group.
I've been told
no.
they can't be invited.
Okay.
So they were ready with, for example, one head teacher was ready with presentation. With all the data, and they couldn't do it because they were not allowed to, and they've sent it to me and then I have to share, but it was not debated or there were no questions except that I attended as a participant only to ask one couple of questions, but it was not a participatory one. I would really appreciate if, for example, in this scrutiny meeting, heads come in and then talk to us and then,
well,
like that's what it did.
I know that Environment Advisory Group is a public forum now. It used to be part 2, like Transport Advisory Group, but my recollection is that they did invite people in from outside periodically. I will go back and talk to Councillor Gawley about that, because I do think it's something for TAG. I don't think it's necessarily something for scrutiny. And in terms of getting something onto the agenda for March, we wouldn't have anything ready by then anyway, because someone would need to prepare a presentation, bring along a paper, etc. So can I do an action for me to go back to Councillor Gawley? Councillor Bowick?
Thank you. Councillor Amatharaj's concerns about social housing, but this is not something that you can lay particularly at Sovereign's door. It's all of the housing providers. It's a national concern. I'm not sure that we've got the kind of bandwidth to pick up a problem that big.
I'm conscious also that Sovereign do go along to Health and Wellbeing Board, because I had asked Denise about whether we should get Sovereign in and she pointed out that they are on health and wellbeing. So we need to do a bit of unpicking of this, I think, and who's represented on which board, because we don't want to tread on other people's toes. We don't want to duplicate work. I do take on board what you say about the social housing providers. I know that as ward councillors, we've had a lot of instances of people being in cold homes with repairs that haven't been done. Homes are being sold off and there's no clarity or reassurance that those funds are going to be spent in area. And also, as you say, people saying they're not going to take on that housing. So how is it going to be provided to people? I will go back to Denise because I'm conscious that there's the housing strategy, there's the care leavers and the veterans, there's an empty homes paper, there's the renters bill, our response to that. So there's a whole load of things around housing, which I think we should look at, but we just need to look at who else is doing what. So I'll take that as an action point to go away and continue that discussion with Denise, if that's okay. But yeah, you're quite right, Councillor Boak. It's not only Sovereign, it's other providers as well. Yeah, thank you. Okay, good. Thank you, Councillor Amatharis, for those 2 points and other members for your comments thereon. We've got an item about transformation coming to our July meeting. There's a lot of work happening around that, and I think it's good that we can have a look at that. And then libraries, the libraries report was pushed back to July. We've had a conversation with Councillor Foote about this and he is going to come back to us. I've said the most important thing is to do it in a timely fashion so that we can look at it and we can make recommendations that feed into the work that he's doing rather than bringing something to us when it's all decided. So he reassured us that he would do that. We've got various financial reports for July as well. Community safety in September. And the review of wraparound care, we will push back, as I mentioned before the start of the meeting, so we'll return to that in the future. Any other comments on the work programme? No. Councillor Amatharis.
Sorry, there's a typo. I don't know whether I missed it. It's in the last 17 March 2025. It should be 2026, I guess.
Okay, thank you. Great. Okay. I think we're finished then, folks. So thank you very much indeed, members, for your participation. Again, thank you to officers who've come along this evening. Thank you for Gordon for being our clerk. And we will see you in March. And thank you to everyone who's been watching as well. Thank you.